Hello everyone, Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as a Kryptonian in Marvel, Part 5. If you enjoy this content, smash the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description.
Syrian hadn't planned on releasing Captain America from his cryosleep anytime soon. At least, he didn't want the old soldier to wake up until the war in the Middle East was at its height. The last thing he wanted was for the old war hero to be thrown into a new battlefield right after the man sacrificed his life in World War II. But circumstances demanded the good captain's presence in the world. The war against Hydra was one such instance, and Syrian theorized that the presence of a good captain would take the heat off his shoulders. Both S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra would be keeping an eye on a resurgent Captain America while they waged their shadow war. The general war in the Middle East would also throw more discord and confusion within the ranks of all intelligence agencies as enemies pop up all over the globe in one way or another. Already, Syrian had picked up on the chatter among the intelligence community that pirates, smugglers, terrorists and other criminal elements were getting far too active because most nations were embroiled in war. It was almost as if World War III had broken out. There was also an entirely selfless reason he was happy to release Captain America. The man had been lost in ice for far too long. Just holding the guy in cryo sleep after he extracted the secrets of the super soldier serum did not seem fair to him. Therefore, he was happy to awaken Captain America from his decades-long slumber. At first, Syrian thought of delivering Captain Rogers to S.H.I.E.L.D. inside the cryo module. But then he thought better of it. There was a good chance Hydra might intervene and S.H.I.E.L.D. end up misplacing Captain Rogers. So, he decided to risk it to wake the captain in Corin itself. "Release the cryo doors," Syrian ordered. "Are you sure, Lord Vex? Once Captain Rogers wakes, he'll see our base, which would jeopardize us. S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra will know we have a base on the planet." Optima warned him as she floated by his side. "They already know I have a base. After all, I've kept the remains of my ship and the Kree ship I destroyed hidden from their sight," Syrian reasoned, eyeing the drone that was floating by his side. "Very well," Optima replied. The door of the cryo chamber unlocked with a hiss and slid upwards, releasing a rush of cold air. "Bruce? All vitals look normal. Brain activity, blood pressure, and body temperature are picking up. His body seems to be recovering fast," Bruce reported without looking up from the datapad in his hand. The panel on which the cryo bed resided straightened and folded outwards until it rearranged itself into a bed. Syrian came near the cryo bed while Optima and Bruce stood on the other side of the bed. "Introduce light stimuli," Bruce said. Optima flashed a concentrated beam of light from the hovering drone directly into Captain Rogers's closed eyes. As Optima increased the beam's intensity, they could see movement in the eyes and a subtle shift in facial muscles. "Captain Rogers, please wake up." Syrian began tapping the man's cheek and forehead until his guest's eyes slowly opened. "He is waking up." Optima monitored his vitals. "Where am I?" Captain Rogers whispered while his eyes darted from one side to the other. "You are in a remote facility in the Pacific, Captain. My name is Syrian Vex. Now, please tell me if you feel any discomfort." He helped the captain sit up on the bed and patiently waited for the man to regain his bearings. I crashed the plane." "How did I?" Captain Rogers shook his head. "You went in the ice, Captain. I fished you out from the ice once I found the remains of the crashed Nazi aircraft," Syrian explained while Optima gave the man a warm blanket. "What is that?" Captain Rogers asked, blinking rapidly at the drone offering him the blanket. "My name is Optima. I'm an artificial intelligence created by Lord Vex to help manage his affairs. Optima might as well have spoken in gobbledygook because Captain Rogers stared incomprehensibly at Optima. Optima is a machine with programmable intelligence. Sirian explained. He didn't think that'd be a reasonable explanation, but the captain just nodded dumbly. I don't think I've seen anything like that my whole life. Captain Rogers looked gobsmacked and stared at the drone with wide eyes. Most haven't. Is anything bothering you? Can you hear me properly? How's your eyesight? No. I'm fine. Captain Rogers muttered, looking around at the base in confusion. Just one thing, though. What happened with the war? Captain Rogers asked. Perhaps that'd be a topic of discussion for later. Bruce suggested, looking worriedly at Sirian. No. Captain Rogers is a military officer. He has the fortitude to handle the truth. Sirian disagreed. Please, follow me. Sirian led the captain away from the med bay and towards the island's sandy beaches. Along the way, he slowly breaks the truth of what happened after the captain went under ice. Sirian eyed Steve Rogers out of the corner of his eye as they drove into the airfield. The man had gone silent once he had explained the current situation to the captain. You, okay? If you want, I can offer you my ranch in San Felix. SHIELD or the government won't bother you while you spend some time in peace, Sirian said. No. I'm fine. It's just. I had plans. Captain Rogers said, morosely staring outside the car. As someone who failed spectacularly in plans, let me give you some advice, Captain Rogers. The past is the past. No matter how much you wish, you can't change it. So, I hope that you focus on the present and see the good it offers. I know. Captain Rogers nodded. It's just, not that easy. Nothing ever worth doing is easy, Captain. Sirian pulled his car to a stop near a hangar. He could see several black SUVs parked with Director Fury standing up front. He also noted that Maria and Agent Coulson were flanking the SHIELD director. Cutting the engine's power, Sirian stepped out of his now silent Camaro. Director Fury. Agent Coulson. Maria. I present to you, Captain Rogers. Sirian said with a flourish. Sirian noticed Coulson standing a little straight with his head held high as Captain Rogers walked around the car and came before them. He shared an amused smile with Maria, who also noticed Coulson's sudden sharp posture. Captain Rogers, welcome back to the real world. Agent Coulson said, shaking hands with the super soldier. I hope you're comfortable. I went into ice, and half a century passed in the blink of an eye. People and food have changed, and we even have aliens living amongst us. Captain Rogers nodded awkwardly at Arian. I don't know whether I'm dreaming or not. This is as real as it gets, Captain. SHIELD was created from the SSR after the Allies' victory in 1950. By then, the SSR had stopped functioning, as there was no Hydra left by 1945, said Director Fury. Sirian saw Fury's one good eye jump to him as he paused before setting his eye back on the super soldier. We were founded by Howard Stark, Chester Phillips, and Peggy Carter. They always said it was your selfless actions and honorable conduct that inspired them to build SHIELD. So, in their name and in the name of all those good people who fought for a better future, I welcome you, Captain Rogers. Some rounds of introductions followed, and after that, a SHIELD medical team immediately started to look after the captain for any damages. This is unnecessary. I made sure he was in top health after waking him from cryo sleep, said Sirian, watching Captain Rogers get poked at by the medics. We like to be thorough. Given the recent revelations, I like nothing to be left to chance, said Fury. Speaking of which, where are you with that pest problem? Sirian asked tentatively, mindful of the people in the base. We're handling it," Fury said shortly with an undertone of disinterest in pursuing this line of conversation. "I hope you don't dally long, Director. Time is of the essence," Syrian said. He wanted to stick around the base to see what S.H.I.E.L.D. intended to do with Captain Rogers. But he had a board meeting to attend, and he needed to prepare for this one because there was a proposal on the floor about expansion overseas into Japan. From there, he hoped to spread into the wider Asian market to get the ball rolling. His hydrogen engine had garnered a lot of attention from Japan, an economic giant in Asia that imported too much of its energy. If they could rapidly switch over to clean energy, that'd open a new industry, generating new jobs and wealth while freeing up the oil money. Local opposition to nuclear energy also existed because of its safety issues and other historical reasons. He saw no problem using nuclear energy as a springboard to wean off coal and other fossil fuels for mass energy production. It solved much of the world's energy crisis in the short term, even though some of the older reactors posed a security risk. But hydrogen would suit Earth's automobile industry's energy needs. If smartly used, it could even power the needs of island nations. They'd get self-sustainability with hydrogen power generation, and he foresaw the Pacific Islands finally getting the boot off their collective necks. Spreading business in Europe was easy, but Asia was another game. It was the most popular continent, and if he wanted to make the world switch to greener energy, he needed the Asian markets, as most of the automobile industry was interconnected. So, he was looking for trusted partners to facilitate his company's transition into the Asian market. Syrian was high in the air, flying in a chartered flight. Most of his company staff for this meeting were already in Tokyo, laying the groundwork for the meeting. He was only held back thus far because of S.H.I.E.L.D. and their insistence on getting their grubby hands on Steve Rogers. He had no doubt they were already studying the extracted blood from the super soldier to improve upon the current super soldier serum in their possession. "Sir, these are the merger packages the board discussed," John Blum said, handing him a dossier. He nodded absently, noting that he needed to convert everything into digital files as quickly as possible. The physical files were a nuisance. Unfortunately, not everyone was keen on entering the digital age. His board was one such example, resisting the total digitalization of the company's structure. "These are the dossiers you requested about the market performance, cash flow, assets, equity, outstanding liabilities." Syrian speed-read the files one after the other, listening for concise explanations from his assistant. Although there were no plans to merge with any Japanese automobile giant, they were considering their options. Some South Korean companies were also in talks with them about further expansion or even straight-up technology transfer. Some board members were interested in solo expansion, but some called for solo expansion in Europe while pursuing a different strategy in Asia and Africa. Syrian also leaned towards the latter opinion of seeking a local partner. He had asked some analysts and industry specialists to formulate a report on the viability of going solo into other continents. The European market was not alien to their company, as they were already in the process of expanding into the EU. But Asia was a far more complicated market, with several established auto giants dominating the market. The market there was also hawkish on new technology, far more than in Europe or the Americas. Therefore, a local partner already entrenched in the market was preferable. Asian customers valued trust and reputation, while a standard Western customer had a proclivity towards new products and especially new technology. "Seeing something. John, I want the data on." Syrian blinked, and in the next moment, his plane exploded. Syrian could only watch in stunned disbelief as the plane and everyone around him were consumed by flames and shattered by the shockwave of the explosion. When he became aware of the explosion, he immediately pulled John to his side and tried to shield the man with his body. But multiple explosions and shockwaves soon racked the plane from multiple sides, and he could only helplessly watch as his assistant was blown to bits before he could put up a shield. His half-formed shield collapsed as he watched the upper body of his assistant burn and blown away while the lower half remained intact under his energy shield. As fire and smoke surrounded Syrian, he could only feel a cold numbness as his eyes traced the blown remains of the air hostess and the two pilots mixed in with the shattered plane as it fell into the Pacific Ocean. Syrian floated high in the sky as he stared in horror at the half-burnt remains of the plane and the people he was traveling with. He allowed the energy shield to collapse and let his assistant's lower torso fall into the sea. More plasma bolts impacted his body from different sides, and Syrian stayed floating in the sky, taking all those shots. Slowly but surely, rage started to flood into his veins. Any tears he wanted to shed for the poor souls he could not save were burned away as his eyes lit up with power upon finding cloaked ships around him. He counted 5 ships firing all their weapons at him to take him apart. But he was now exerting the full power of a Kryptonian. The senses he had suppressed to mingle normally with the humans, as was his physical prowess, were now unrestrained. The cloak generators surrounding the 5 ships could no longer evade his eyes or ears. Syrian rocketed straight towards one of the ships, and with full power, he punched it. The ship cracked open like an egg while the shattered remains rocketed straight up. Twin blasts of pale blue beams blasted out of his eyes, incinerating the pilots inside as he carved them up. Vibranium, he snarled, noticing the slight resistance the metal put forth against his attack. Syrian pressed the dial on his watch, and the vibranium nanites covered his body in a metallic suit. He didn't care one whit about why the Wakandan military was attacking him. Taking a deep breath, he blew ice breath on 2 ships and encased them in a huge block of ice. The ships covered in ice fell into the sea below with their engines powering down. Suddenly, his senses alerted him of an object flying straight towards him. He moved aside and caught a spear made of vibranium in his left hand. Without looking back, he threw it back, and he could hear the spear pierce straight through a woman's beating heart. He knew the exact moment her heart stopped beating while the spear punched through her heart and proceeded to strike another ship's engine. He watched dispassionately as the ship went down into the sea with its power cut off. When the soldiers inside tried to jump out of the ship, he met them with concentrated blasts of bluish plasma. 3 decapitated heads fell into the sea, and Syrian turned his attention to the last remaining ship. He saw the Black Panther standing near the corpse of the woman he had speared to death. He felt no mercy as he floated to the level of the Black Panther with his head held high. "Okoye," the Black Panther whispered in grief. The Wakandan prince let out a bellow of rage and jumped toward Syrian with his sharp claws. To Syrian, the Black Panther moved at a snail's pace, unlike the Hulk. In that fight, he had to hold back a lot as hurting Bruce Banner was not his intent. However, such considerations weren't factored into the current situation. Therefore, he led the assault with twin beams of concentrated blue plasma that slammed into the vibranium suit of the Black Panther. The Wakandan prince was slammed into the surface of the last remaining ship. He could hear the man struggle and scream as the plasma started to burn the vibranium away and slowly cut in. The suit deflected bits and pieces of energy, but the searing heat of his power could not be completely held off, even by the strongest metal on Earth, indefinitely. Abruptly cutting off the plasma beams, Syrian surged forward and violently slammed into the ship. The ship with Black Panther slammed into the Pacific unceremoniously, beaten and unable to maintain a defense or an attack. As he floated next to the fallen prince of Wakanda, he was tempted to summon his spear, skewer the air to the Wakandan throne against the ship, and leave him for dead. But he held back that urge because he wasn't just interested in the hand that struck his people down but also the brains behind this assault. With that in mind, Syrian punched the Wakandan prince in the face. The vibranium mask could only take so much force, and the Black Panther fell unconscious. "Optima, are you there?" He spoke into the transmitter of his suit after he calmed down. "Yes, Lord Vex," his trusted AI chimed. Send the Dauntless to my location with a salvage crew. I want no trace of the Wakandan ships or their people left in this area. Syrian said before his eyes trailed to the unconscious form of the Black Panther. Prepare a cryo-prison as well. We have several hostile prisoners to hold. It'll be done. The Dauntless is en route. ETA 3 minutes, said Optima. We're still recovering your plane's black box and other parts. For now, we have everything under control. Are you sure there is nothing else you can share about what happened? Maria asked from the comms. Unfortunately, no. One moment, everything was fine, and the next, the whole plane exploded. I can tell you the explosion happened from the pilot's cockpit, but other than that, I'm afraid I've got nothing useful. Syrian said as he watched the drones deconstruct the salvaged ships to their base elements. Only the ships destroyed in battle were being pulled apart by the drones. He had salvaged 2 intact ships from the crash site from the frozen block of ice. From those 2 ships, he took 4 prisoners. For the moment, they were kept in a cell in Corin. The Kree holding cells were old and not up to his standards, but they could hold the Wakandans for now. But an enhanced warrior like Chala was another matter. Keep me in the loop if you find anything. My people will shortly make a statement to the press. I assume you already have agents in the field on that. Yes. We're in touch with your people. Maria said, we'll get to the bottom of this and handle the situation. Take care, Syrian. You too, Maria. Syrian cut off the connection and turned back to the Wakandan prince, who was held back by the drone's restraints. So, are you planning to say anything, or are you content to keep your silence? Syrian asked coldly. Chala remained stubborn and kept his mouth shut. Very well. As you will. Syrian nodded at the drones. The long tongues of metallic vines dragged the struggling Wakandan prince into a simple gray-colored board on the floor. For the crimes of murder and assassination attempt, I sentence you to life imprisonment pending diplomatic overtures from Wakanda. Until then, enjoy a long sleep, Chala of Wakanda. Syrian declared. A foggy white gel grew out of the gray board, in capturing the Black Panther, who was stripped of all his fancy vibranium suit and weapons. Once the process was complete, the drones opened a panel on the wall, showing a larger cryo hold inside. The frozen Chala was dumped into the cryo hold, and the drones restored the panel. Maybe we should have questioned him more thoroughly. We could use our methods. Vincent Burrows suggested, tagging along with him as they moved to the cell where 4 other Wakandan prisoners were held. Syrian looked at the former CIA operative from the corner of his eye. You mean use torture? Syrian shook his head. No. I have a cleaner method of extracting valuable information without harming the prisoners. Besides, information revealed from torture may not necessarily be true. My method is better. I'm curious to see what your method of intelligence extraction entails. Vincent said airily. You're welcome to tag along. A few minutes later, they were standing in a lab with a Wakandan soldier strapped to a chair. The soldier remained stubbornly silent, but Syrian was hardly bothered. I got the opportunity to study the inner workings of the Eternals closely. I designed this device as a failsafe to recalibrate their systems if something happened to them. But when I built it, I never envisioned other uses, but now. The white chair moved on its own, and 2 metallic strips were pressed against the temples of the Wakandan soldier. The metallic strips lit up with a green light. Begin extraction. A series of screens popped up, with clear images and sounds depicting memories of the Wakandan soldier strapped to the chair. Now, that's a hoot. Vincent commented, this chair can read minds? It can extract memories without harming the subject. So, verifiable intelligence without harming the subject. Well, boss. "I stand corrected," said Vincent, his grin turning into a smirk as the former CIA agent looked at the Wakandan prisoner strapped to the chair. "So, what next?" "We study their defenses and prepare." "You have the command, Agent Burroughs." In the book In Search of Lost Time, Marcel Proust said, "Don't meet your idols." Syrian now became intimately aware of just how profoundly evocative that statement was. He was sitting in a room facing the aging parents of John Blum and the grieving widow who was 6 months pregnant. Because of Chala, the family before him was grieving, and no matter how powerful he was, he could not bring a son or a husband back to life. Nor did he think he could console the family in any meaningful manner. In the end, John Blum's death would only seriously affect the man's family. The man's parents lost their only son, a young woman lost her husband, and a child would grow up without knowing their father. All because some damn tyrant decided to attack me. Syrian thought with anger. He could understand if he was the sole target. He wouldn't have liked to get the Wakandan army and their prince hunting him, but he could take them. But what did his poor assistant ever do to the prissy pricks of Wakanda? What did this family do to those idiots? What did the 2 pilots and that poor air hostess do to the mighty kingdom of Wakanda? He wondered whether this was part of his bad karma for facilitating a bloody war among the humans. Then again, his sins were his own to carry, not the people around him who worked hard to make ends meet. Even now, having captured the perpetrators, he felt he hadn't done enough. He wanted to fly into Wakanda unannounced and show those prissily little tots what a Kryptonian can do. But he was not a military man and had no experience in organized warfare. The better part of his life was spent in a lab, leaving him woefully inadequate to take retaliatory action against Wakanda. In fact, after much thought, he doubted anything good would come from a war with Wakanda. A war would entail needless civilian casualties, and he didn't want more blood to be spilt on any soil for whatever reason. But he would not allow them to go with a slap on the wrist either. So, it was with a heavy heart that he consoled the grieving family and promised them all the aid he could give. The funeral was even more of a morose affair with a closed casket ceremony. There was not much to show, as the body was in bits and pieces. Immediately after the funeral, he returned to work. For now, he was keeping his distance from the planned expansion into Asian markets and leaving it to the legal team and industry experts. There was a rumor circling around that the plane accident was an assassination attempt by rival businesses. The PR wing in his company had suggested that they milk the situation to their benefit and never actively deny such allegations before the media. The publicity that this offered was simply too much to ignore. Naturally, the suspicions would fall on oil companies and the giant of the auto industry. The PR wing hoped their convenient silence on the issue and evasive answers like, "We are cooperating with the law enforcement agencies to find the truth. The law will take its own course. We have full trust in the investigation agencies to find the truth of this unfortunate incident." Such doctored lines would jolt the interests of journalists who'd start to dig deep. They'd probably hit a wall with S.H.I.E.L.D. taking over, and that'd just let the tongues wag. He was sure a lot of conspiracy theorists would crop up. It was free publicity as far as his people were concerned. A few discreet investments in media outlets should also keep them happy. Some sponsorship of popular shows was also on the drawing board. The media hype would help in popularizing hydrogen as an alternate fuel. Already, their ads promoted green tech and emphasized the need to cut carbon output. Their biggest advantage, however, was the low fuel cost of liquid hydrogen compared to petrol or diesel. But that could change once the war ended and oil flowed abundantly from the Middle East. In preparation for that, Syrian had some people working on better refining processes to make cheap liquid hydrogen. Right now, it was $1 a gallon, which he hoped to push down to 90 cents or 80 cents if they were lucky. With most of the business taken care of, he could focus on how to deal with Wakanda. The obvious move was to contact a Wakandan embassy and set his terms for a negotiated settlement to defuse the hostilities. But Syrian was getting tired of playing the good guy all the time. He had allowed many of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s shenanigans since he hung his coat on the planet in the hope of better relations and cooperation in the future. He had tried to understand and accommodate many of their duplicities because he needed time and resources to build back and expand upon his capabilities. Now that he had the Dauntless and a small fleet of fighter crafts under his command, he was not as dependent on the goodwill of his human allies. Therefore, he saw no reason to extend the same courtesy to Wakanda when they attacked him unprovoked and murdered his innocent employees. Besides, this time, he had a few experts in warfare and counterintelligence to aid him. Activating the space bridge beneath his home in California, he stepped into Corin. The portal behind him shut down with a snap. "Lord Vex, they're waiting for you in the Situation Room." Optima spoke through one of the drones guarding the city's space bridge hangar. "Have they pieced together the intelligence we gathered?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Did they share their plan with you?" "Yes, sir." "What do you have to say about their plan?" "Based on all the data I've gathered, I project a 68% chance of success," said Optima. Syrian grunted noncommittally as he walked out of the hangar. "We should strike at the head of the snake. I suggest straight-out assassination. It's a standard procedure used by the CIA to destabilize enemy governments. We assassinate the current government and manufacture a civil war," Michelle suggested without any shred of reservation, as if she were talking about the weather. When Syrian suggested that they devise plans to respond to Wakanda's attack, he wasn't expecting a straight-up assassination and destabilization of the entire nation. "No," Syrian vehemently disagreed. "We'll not be sowing a civil war in Wakanda. There is enough war on the planet as it is." "What is this? The meeting of King Arthur's court?" Michelle shot him an unimpressed look. "What else are we supposed to do to an enemy that's willing to kill and assassinate as a first response with no thought to civilian casualties?" Try as he might, Syrian couldn't argue against Michelle's logic. But brazenly attacking Wakanda would spell doom for their people who had no part in the ruling council of the kingdom. "I agree with Lord Vex. We should remember that ordinary Wakandans have little to no say in how their country is being run. Even if those people approve of the attack, we should not let this spill out into all-out war." Bryn spoke softly, but his words had the necessary impact on those sitting around the round table. Michelle shrugged her shoulders and scowled as she leaned back in her seat while the others around the table nodded. "So what? Are you planning to talk nicely with these Wakandans and expect them to listen to a word? They are a freaking kingdom with a dictatorship ruling the country for thousands of years. They understand only the language of might," Michelle said. "She does have a point," Derek, the former USAF officer, reluctantly said before looking at Syrian. "They attacked you once. Slapping an enemy on the wrist invites more attacks. They need to know that we can strike back and won't hesitate to do so. Deterrence to open conflict must be backed with strength. We must let the Wakandans know of our strength to ensure the cessation of further hostilities," said Thomas. "Bruce?" Syrian looked imploringly at the scientist-turned-sorcerer in their little group. "I don't know, Syrian. On the one hand, I sort of get where these Wakandans are coming from. They want to keep their country safe and not want the world to come after their resources. But," Syrian prodded, making Bruce sigh. "As Michelle said, Wakanda is ruled by its king and a council of tribal leaders. We can make any plans, but they must be convinced to leave us alone. Without that, there'll be no peace with Wakanda," Bruce said, looking uncomfortable. "The council must be struck. Their king needs to see that his security is an illusion and that his actions have consequences," Michelle said, happy that her view was supported even though it was a watered-down version. "Still, attacking the king of Wakanda. Wouldn't that cause war to be declared? Syrian was troubled at the prospect of a war with Wakanda. If things went wrong, he could leave Earth and live elsewhere. But he liked spending time on Earth despite the many problems it entails. Wakanda could also choose to target his people to get to him even if he left once he attacked their king and ruling council. We use Prince T'Challa to seal the deal. His value as our prisoner depends on Wakanda's willingness to accept their surrender and agree to a negotiated settlement. Bryn suggested. But we should not hand over the prisoners. Let the Wakandans buy their prince and their soldiers with their precious vibranium. Michelle added with a smirk. Syrian looked around at the table, and the majority agreed with the sentiment. All right then. We'll need a plan and a detailed treaty in hand. Let's make sure the specifics are carefully framed before we take any action. Syrian said as he opened a new folder on the digital display on the table. It took them 2 days to hash out a plan for proceeding with the response. Sitting in on those meetings was an experience for Syrian, as it was his first experience with strategy formation regarding an invasion of an enemy state. Mostly, he was merely observant, letting the experts take the lead. He was there to study and learn military tactics and how their minds worked. It was not as if he could learn all this stuff from books. First-hand experience was necessary to learn the ins and outs of warfare. Thanks to his recent plunge into the defense sector, he was somewhat familiar with logistics. But other than that, he wasn't good at military strategy. He was reading up on the subject, but written material and hacked reports from the Pentagon were substandard compared to real-life experience. It was Michelle who suggested that they go after the war dogs, the spy wing of the Wakandan military. She theorized that Wakanda might be marshalling their spies to seek intelligence about their missing prince. So, their first area of strike was inside the US itself. Syrian kept his distance from the whole operation and left tactical authority for the spy sweeping in Michelle's safe hands. It was a 3-day operation launched by the former CIA operative. The epicenter of the spy sweep started from Vex Corporation HQ. The intelligence they extracted from the Wakandan ships and prisoners ensured their operatives could identify the enemy seamlessly. Syrian deployed vibranium suits and weapons to all operatives to ensure that his people never suffered any casualties. He also deployed the shielders he had developed for the Black Ops division of the US military for his people. The suits he gave to his operatives also gathered valuable combat data, which he fed directly into his new Sentinel project. The Sentinel project was based on the data he gathered from the Eternals and an offshoot of bots currently working on the modifications of Korran. They were supposed to replace the current Kryptonian drones that function as the crew in the Dauntless. But with his intent to take over a Kree mining planet, he expanded the scope of the Sentinel project to include warrior parameters in the bots. So, all combat data was now directly fed into training the Sentinels before they were allowed to take the field. They were also disconnected from Optima's system core. All of Optima's functions were focused on maintenance, research, and being a virtual intelligence. He hadn't designed her for combat. Therefore, he separated the Sentinels from Optima's command structure. All missions have succeeded. We've got the packages. Michelle's voice cackled from the drone floating beside him. Good. Syrian said absently as he sifted through the neural scheme of one of the Sentinels in the hangar. Take what you need and send the rest to the city. The cryo chambers are primed to hold them. Bruce will be there to assist you upon arrival. Over and out. The connection cut off, and Syrian continued to compile several lines of code on the datapad. All right. Let's try this out. Syrian pulled the cord out of the Sentinel bot and pushed in the crystallized circuitry that hosted the codes of a limited intelligence into the control unit. The bot lit up as it became active. Its eyes glowed bright gold, showing off the plasma pellets inside and getting energized. It dies down immediately once its burning irises settle on Syrian. Sentinel number 01 reporting for duty, sir, the bot saluted, standing at attention. Sentinel, weapons check. Syrian ordered. The bot's arms shifted as metal plates folded back, and 2 plasma cannons appeared atop its forearms. The fingertips folded back to show mini laser guns. The shoulder blades moved back, showing off a mini automatic rifle and a grenade launcher. The irises glowed an eerie bright yellow, along with 2 specks of light on the bot's face and forehead with plasma. Weapons system operational, the Sentinel said in a robotic voice. Sentinel, flight check. The bot floated almost silently as its anti-grav thrusters worked seamlessly. It flew around Syrian in a controlled flight and returned to its initial position. Nice. At ease, Sentinel. The bot deactivated all its systems and landed on the floor with a minimal energy signature. Syrian connected his data pad to the Sentinel's core and downloaded all the diagnostic data. I'm uploading hand-to-hand combat protocols and training files into your system. Engage in practice sessions on the beachhead. I'll need to assess your real-life performance. Yes, sir. Sentinel saluted before flying out of the hangar. Study Sentinel's movements. I need to know whether to make any alterations to the neural scheme, he ordered the drone, keeping him company. Yes, sir. Optima said before flying out of the hangar following the Sentinel bot. With that out of the way, he kept an eye out for the Serenity, the sole Kryptonian scout ship under his command. It was only thanks to the stealth tech he had built into the ship that Michelle and others could use it to pick the war dogs from across the US with no one the wiser. It didn't take long for most prisoners to arrive via the space bridge while he tracked the Serenity leaving continental America for Africa. The entire Wakandan spy ring in the US was swept away overnight with their actions. But that was not the most important detail. After the war dogs were taken prisoner, he immediately extracted all relevant information from them before the Serenity reached the borders of Wakanda. With the data he mined from their minds, he easily broke through the codes they used to communicate with their handlers in Wakanda proper. Now, he could expose their whole structure to every nation if he so wished. And that was the most potent bargaining chip, even more than their precious Black Panther. After all, he now possessed intelligence data that could cripple Wakanda for decades and expose them to the entire world with solid proof. Michelle looked down from the scouter as Thomas and Derek escorted the bound war dogs towards Wakanda's border. The scouter remained under stealth, but she suspected Wakanda was now aware of their ship, especially with movement so close to their border. We're being scanned by long-range scanners. Optima chirped from her side. Just as I thought, Michelle thought. But she didn't panic. She merely raised the shields of the scouter and primed the plasma cannons in case the Wakandans decided to shoot first and ask questions later. She fired off 2 bolts of plasma shot straight inside their border, which destroyed the holographic projector that cast the illusion net near the area that hid Wakanda. The result was immediate as the projected image flickered and died promptly, exposing Wakanda's borders to her naked eyes. She also targeted several automated defenses close to the border, pricked up by the orbital scan data provided by the Dauntless. A series of explosions lit up the Wakandan border as she rained fire upon the Wakandan border until the last of the marked targets was destroyed. She maintained her hand on the lever that controlled the plasma cannon. She didn't expect to get attacked. After all, they held all the leverage against this hidden kingdom. No matter the technological edge Wakanda boasted, that was peanuts compared to what she had under her fingertips. The tension on her shoulders eased as the war dogs crossed the border of Wakanda without any issue. Now, the waiting game began, and they had to wait for the border patrol to send the message they had given to the war dogs. If it were anyone other than Syrian, she was sure Wakanda would have paid their price in blood. But Syrian was far too forgiving, but she was pragmatic enough to see that he was making the most of the situation and hitting the Wakandans where it hurt the most. The peace treaty they offered was bound to shake up the royal family of Wakanda and their stupid council. Wakanda would have no choice but to submit to their demands if they wanted their precious prince and spies intact. Michelle now had the capability and intelligence to expose Wakanda's entire spy ring, which was spread across the world. With her tactical team, she painstakingly routed Wakanda's operatives in the U.S. With the data that she extracted from the handlers of those spies, she also collected the spies from other nations. One wrong move would expose Wakanda to the whole world. Michelle kept an eye on the reports being filed by her direct subordinates on a parallel screen. It was not that hard to recruit military intelligence officers from across the globe. Syrian's angel persona helped in their silent recruiting, and right now, the chaos of war was more than enough cover for the whole thing to go unnoticed. Their boss had planned to come clean with the rest of the recruits, but she, along with the others, managed to dissuade him from making such a mistake. Their entire recruitment pitch was focused on vulnerable military or intelligence personnel and their families. Most of them had lost hope or were too injured, broke, lonely, and without hope. The instant assurance of a supreme entity was psychologically comforting, as was in her case. She had lost her legs from a mine explosion. Her fellow officer was blown to bits, and it was by sheer luck that she evaded capture. Syrian had not only restored her but given her a new life even though he had lied about being an angel. But sometimes Michelle couldn't help but think Syrian was testing them all. He possessed almost all the powers of an angel except for the audience with God part. For Christ's sake, he had wings made of the brightest light coming out of his shoulder blades. So, even if Syrian had come clean to a few of them, Michelle was adamant on keeping that tidbit of information locked away from the lower cadres of their budding organization. It was hardly the time to be truthful, anyway. They were preparing to conquer a whole planet. Michelle could hardly believe she was even a part of such a historic enterprise. She didn't know Syrian's priorities or reasons. She doubted he was interested in preserving the human race, as he claimed. If she was being honest, she suspected her alien boss was just lonely and wanted some humans to make a little community of their own. The more she thought about it, the more it made sense than the stupid-ass reason of preserving humanity. Michelle was immensely attracted by the prospect of starting anew on another planet. It was a chance to start over. On this new planet, the national boundaries would become irrelevant. Human civilization would stand united instead as 1,000 tribes. And most importantly, she could ensure the chaos that was democracy would never take root in this new world. She had seen and suffered the cost of democracy. If they were building a new civilization, she wanted that to be a militaristic one where the words, honor, and justice, were not just a punchline by those fat asses with champagne bottles or blood-sucking lawyers said to get their skinny asses out of trouble. The sensors on the panel before her beeped, making Michelle sit up straight. "You're about to get company," she said to Derek and Thomas through the comms. "Yeah, we see 'em," Thomas replied. "Your call, Thomas," she said back, keeping her eyes peeled for enemy movements. Her grip on the plasma cannon lever tightened as the scanner picked up more enemy buildup along the Wakanda border. "Only 2 people are stepping out of the camouflage. Stand down. I repeat, stand down." Thomas's voice cackled through the comms. Michelle relaxed slightly in her seat, but her grip remained on the lever. She saw an armored man walk out of the border with a spear-wielding woman. "The King of Wakanda," Michelle muttered. "I'm Chaka, the King of Wakanda. Wakanda is ready to discuss terms for the release of our prince and our operatives." Michelle was surprised by the easy capitulation. She had expected more resistance from Wakanda. In preparation for that, the Serenity was high in orbit under cloak with an ion cannon primed to strike the Wakandans. "I have already informed Lord Vex. He'll be here soon." Optima chimed before she could ask the AI to relay the information. She hardly had to wait a minute before her ears picked up a booming sound in the sky. In the next moment, she saw Syrian float down from the sky in his gleaming silver armor. The Wakandans took a few steps back on her boss' sudden appearance. "Now, we can have peace." Michelle grinned. It took Wakanda 6 months to complete its obligations under the treaty. As part of the peace treaty and prisoner exchange they signed, Wakanda delivered the last of 2,250,000 tons of vibranium. That was enough vibranium ore to build at least 20 Dauntless-class ships made of pure vibranium. Of course, Syrian was not an idiot to build ships based on a singular metal across its profile. There were a lot of other technical aspects to consider. But the Wakandans were content to let their vessels come out in full vibranium. It was one of the reasons why they couldn't build shield emitters on their ships despite their technological advancements. Syrian had the opportunity and time to study the salvaged Wakandan ships in detail in the last 6 months. The inherent property of vibranium to absorb and evenly distribute energy made it impractical to use energy shields on their ships. The intrinsic property of vibranium tended to deplete their shields, which he found after some extensive testing with the intact ships he captured. His plan of retrofitting the vibranium ships with the available weapons and tech in hand was left in the lurch by the problems encountered with the shielding technology. He was sure there was some method to control the properties of vibranium. However, it needed more experimentation. For now, using a vibranium alloy was the only way to circumvent the challenges faced in using an energy shield on spacecraft. As the 6 months drew to a close, Syrian made sure to tie up his affairs on Earth. He knew his absence would be felt, but he had prepared for it. He assigned an excellent management team to take care of the companies he started, ensuring their continued success. Ustream was already under different management, and they were doing fantastic work in expanding the cyber presence of their platform. With VEX smartphones, desktops, and laptops gaining more popularity, the Solprime OS allowed for the accelerated growth and reach of Ustream. Similarly, he pulled back his direct management of VEX Corporation and put some people in between to manage the company's affairs while he went for his vacation. He still hadn't developed a functioning humanoid bot that could realistically pass off as his body double. His work on that was progressing, but not to the level he was comfortable with. Still, he couldn't be tied down to Earth with certain plans in motion. So, he left his major assets in good hands while also keeping close communication while he prepared to journey into the stars. So, in October of 2005, he was ready to leave Earth and take on the Kree mining planet designated C-24. By that time, his recruiting pool of ex-military and intelligence agencies from around the world had expanded, giving him a total strength of 624 personnel spread across 3 ships. His old Kryptonian scout ship, Serenity, housed only 30 people, as it was the smallest of the crewed spaceships capable of exospace travel. The Dauntless hosted 124 people, most of whom were from the former Marine Corps. His newest ship, the Star Killer, hosted 340 soldiers, including some of the officer corps of his budding fleet. It was the first ship he built using vibranium alloy. The Star Killer was only slightly larger than the Dauntless, as it also acted as a cargo ship. Right now, he was on the bridge of Star Killer, watching the last of their precious cargo moved on board by the Kryptonian bots and the new Sentinel Corps he had painstakingly built up. Only Star Killer and the Dauntless hosted the fighter-class crafts, which he developed in a minimal capacity. He called them Phoenix Fighters. Trained naval officers commandeered all 3 ships. Most of their training was done on simulations in Corin and a bit of real-world experience in the last 6 months of several small-scale missions. Ship. Length, meters. Width, meters. Phoenix, fighter class. 20. 38. Serenity, scouter class. 700. 480. The Dauntless, destroyer class. 2,600. 600. The Star Killer, Super Destroyer Class. 3,500. 1,000. Sirian had been training them by hunting down some of the secret Hydra bases in the world, capturing their resources and turning their operatives into his own budding army. Of course, he also took care not to include those captured agents in his new operatives. They were still held in Korran and were undergoing some reconditioning before they were allowed to join the Space Naval Corps. The study of Eternals and the complexities involved in their psyche, along with his research into human biology, had allowed him to use memory wipes and extractions. He was weaponizing that technology against the captured Hydra agents to wipe them clean and give them a clean slate. "Sir, the cargo bay reports the payload is aboard. We are a go." "Good." Sirian nodded. "Optima, initiate takeoff sequence." "Yes, sir," Optima replied. The screen before him switched to the video feed of the cargo bay, where the doors started to slide in and seal themselves shut. The screen slab started to show structural integrity, radiation levels, engine energy outputs, energy consumption from different blocks, cooling systems, and the status of other assorted systems. "Engaging anti-grav thrusters," Optima said. The screen before him flickered to show all Serenity, Dauntless, and Star Killer activating their thrusters simultaneously. "Korran, disengage the magnetic clamps." Sirian ordered into the mic. The officers operating the command center from Korran removed the clamps holding the ships in place, allowing the 3 ships to float on the thrusters' power. "Engage stealth mode and take us out of Earth's gravity." Sirian lounged back in his seat and kept a close eye on the screens as the 3 ships simultaneously engaged their boosters to generate enough thrust to climb out of the Earth's atmosphere. "Engaging SATCOM blinders," Officer Andrew said from Sirian's right side. The Earth's satellites that were keeping their eyes on the Pacific went blind, allowing their ships to move out of the magical ward and keeping the island out of sight. T-80 seconds for SATCOM blinders to shut down. "Engage shields," Sirian ordered once he saw the air friction pass the threshold. The energy shields snapped into place, taking away any direct friction burning up their ship's surface and the shallow turbulence they felt. He watched the status of the energy shields of all 3 ships as they quickly breached the Earth's atmosphere within the designated time. "SATCOM blinders are down in 10 seconds. Officer Andrew spoke up. "Engage the exospace drive," Sirian said. "Aye, sir." The space around Star Killer warped as the ship jumped into FTL mode. For a brief moment, they lost sight of their sister ships as space folded on itself. Star Killer's sensors picked up 2 other energy signatures following their exospace lane. "Sir, comms are restored." "The Dauntless and Serenity report stable FTL jumps," Officer Andrew reported. "Good." Sirian relaxed in his seat. "Put the fighters on standby. We commence the attack in 30 minutes. Sirian stood from his seat as Star Killer exited exospace, followed by Dauntless and Serenity. The projected screens before he switched showed C-24, the mining planet of the Kree Empire. It was a planet on the furthest border of Kree space, and that was why he chose to strike at this planet. "Open a channel to Serenity," Sirian ordered. "The channel is open, sir." "Captain Vincent. Take out the satellite defense systems," Sirian ordered. "We hear you, Star Killer." Serenity moving in to intercept. The plasma ray guns on Serenity came alive and began raining down bolts of energy upon a chain of satellites surrounding the planet. "Sir, we're getting scanned from the planet's surface," one of the officers reported. "Track the signal and bombard the enemy position," Sirian ordered. The long-range plasma cannons on Star Killer energized before they started firing into the planet's surface. As Star Killer pummeled the position on the planet that scanned, he opened a channel to the Dauntless. Captain Michel. Take out their communication installations on the other side. You have operational command over the Dauntless and Serenity. Yes, sir. Sirian watched the two ships move to the dark side of the planet, which was submerged in the night. While their earlier recon missions had given them an overall plot of the Kree military installations on the planet, targeting those installations at night would be slightly challenging. It'd be a job for the fighter squadrons to sweep any such surviving installations with precision strikes. For now, they had no choice but to lead with orbital bombardment instead of precision bombing techniques. After all, they needed to land their ships and use the landing troops to take control of the planet. For half an hour, they maintained orbital bombardment, but Sirian didn't use any incendiary or radioactive missiles. His ship hosted some of them after recovering such missiles from Hydra hideouts, but he kept them back and used plasma weapons. But his ground forces would be equipped with such weapons, as he hadn't had the time to develop weapons for his ground forces. They'd have to make do with French and American-made weaponry. Sir, our surface scanners are picking up activity in the Northeast Sector 8, Officer Smith said, frowning at the screen in his workspace. Bring up the telemetry on the screen, Sirian ordered. When the imagery came on the common screen, it showed one of the islands farther away from the largest continent of C-24. They hadn't seen anything substantial in those islands in their recon missions. But still, they had bunched them into one of the sectors on the northeastern seaboard of the continent. Sir, the spotters detected an energy spike in the accelerometer from Sector 8. It's from the island, Officer Andrew said quickly. It's a plasma buildup. A cannon. Target the island and take that cannon out, Sirian ordered. While the officers on the bridge worked to reposition Star Killer's main cannon on the island, he used his enhanced vision to watch the island. There, he could see a cannon nuzzled in between two large hills covered by a forest. But it fired its first shot before Star Killer could destroy the cannon. Sirian immediately returned to his seat and abruptly moved Star Killer to one side. Still, the bolt of plasma struck the shield protecting the ship, but it was a glancing shot. Shields at 97%, Officer Andrew reported. Do you have the target? Sirian asked. We've got him, sir. Firing the cannon, Officer Andrew said. Sirian watched as a giant explosion consumed the forest area of the island, and the cannon was blown up. Release the fighter squadrons. Have them sweep the continent for any orbital defense systems. Send recon drones as well, Sirian ordered. Aye, sir. Sirian watched from the bridge of Star Killer as 20 of his Phoenix fighters flew out of the bay and entered into C-24's atmosphere. Accompanying them were the recon drones he made to penetrate the planet's surface deeply with better scanning tech that could get detailed imagery of the terrain. It'd also help them in jamming all outgoing signals as well as studying the positions of the ground forces arrayed against them. Sir, the fighter squadrons are facing minor resistance from ground forces, Officer Smith reported. Anything concerning? Sirian asked. Their weapons are not strong enough to breach the shields of Phoenix fighters, sir. Average shield depletion is 1% from enemy fire. Tell them not to engage the ground forces. Their mission is strictly recon, and they are only allowed to engage orbital defense systems and airborne enemy assets. Yes, sir. As Officer Smith conveyed the orders to the squadron sweeping the continent, Sirian focused on the task at hand. It'd have been practical for the squadron to engage the ground forces and eliminate them, but the chances of the Kree fleet coming to the rescue of C-24 couldn't be ruled out. That was why he was holding back Star Killer from landing on the planet and unloading their ground forces. Facing armed and well-supplied Kree ships while unloading cargo on the planet would be the height of tactical error. They had to secure space around the planet from any exospace entry before they could land troops on the ground, as they couldn't confirm that all communications from C-24 would be jammed since commencing hostilities. Sentinel crew, start deploying gravity wells, Syrian ordered. The Sentinel bot started flying out of the open bay of Star Killer with the gravity well module and started placing them around the planet in certain orbits. Send word to Serenity and the Dauntless. Let them know we've started mining the cislunar space of C-24 with gravity wells, Syrian said. Yes, sir. The gravity wells were a defensive mechanism used by Krypton to control all exospace jumps into and out of cislunar space around Krypton. The technology employed artificial gravity to bend the fabric of space between a planet and its moon, employing the dark matter between the planet and its moon. With the gravity wells coming online, the Kree ships would have to jump out of the FTL and travel outside the cislunar space of C-24. The fact that C-24 had 2 moons worked to Syrian's advantage. This meant that the gravity wells could cover more area outside the cislunar space. So, in case the Kree fleet arrived in force, they'd be forced to travel inside the cislunar space from outside and only after they destroyed the gravity wells. That'd give his people enough time to mount a proper defense and send the ships against the Kree. Sir, the fighter squadron reports the Kree forces are attacking the civilian population. Officer Smith said. There was a sudden silence on the bridge as everyone stopped what they were doing and placed their focus on Syrian. They are attacking the Krylorian slaves? Syrian asked with a frown, as that action didn't make much sense. Why are they attacking their slave population instead of us? Shouldn't the Kree be using their slaves against us as fodder? Officer Andrew wondered. They're using a scorched earth policy. Captain Michelle spoke up as her image flickered onto the screen. Captain Michelle. Syrian stared at the woman curiously. The Kree ground forces are doing the same on our continent. They have realized they can't win, so they're destroying the civilian population to deny us any resources, Captain Michelle explained. This changes things, Syrian. We must intervene before they wipe out the Krylorians. They've already suffered enough for centuries. We can't stand by and watch as they get wiped out. Captain Vincent of Serenity also pitched in. Captain Michelle. You have the operational command in your sector. Do what you think best. Syrian eventually said. As the comms cut off, Syrian could feel the weight of stares on him from the men on Star Killer's bridge. Syrian warred within his mind to decide with the least risk for his fledgling fleet. He couldn't allow the civilian slave population of C-24 to be exterminated, but at the same time, he couldn't risk the ship. After thinking for a while, he came to a decision. Star Killer will maintain its position and the complete mining of the cislunar space with gravity wells as we planned beforehand. Syrian said. But sir. He didn't allow the men to protest and continued on. We cannot compromise the mining mission. It'll compromise the safety of this ship and our crew. Syrian said, standing from his seat. He could see the crew on the bridge was unhappy with his decision. But he was not about to condemn the Krylorians living in the ghettos to be slaughtered. After all, he didn't need a ship to fight the Kree forces on the ground. Officer Andrew, you'll take over as captain of the ship. I'm going into C-24. You focus on the mining and follow our plan. Leave the ground forces to me. Syrian immediately made his way to the ship's bay, where the Sentinel bots were diligently carrying out their mission. He flew straight out of the ship into the vacuum of space while the vibranium armor covered his body. As each speck of the metal covered his body while floating in space, he took in the bright white light of the sun of C-24 and cast his senses down to the planet's surface. He blasted straight towards the continent at top speed, locking on to one of its largest ghettos. Mirlan ran for his life with his wife Nera and daughter Bylinska. He was terrified, but so was every Krylorian in their slum. When he rose early in the morning, he was supposed to work in the mines to extract precious metals from the Kree. His wife and daughter were supposed to work in the fields. But Mirlan and his family woke up to see a massive orbital bombardment of their planet. Initially, he feared the bombardment would level the slum and destroy his family and his people. But nothing of that sort happened. The bombardment was focused on the Kree military installations, which were far away from their slums. This had brought hope to Mirlan, who had heard from his forefathers about the mighty Nova Empire and its capital, Xandar. He had heard stories that his people were defended by the Xandarians and one day they'd liberate the enslaved KRYPTONIans. The people in the slums had gathered together and hoped for the best, that their cruel overlords would meet their end. Then, the bombardment stopped, and for whatever reason, the Kree warriors turned their weapons on his people. "They'll kill us all, Mirlan." Nera sobbed as they ran, "Our daughter." Mirlan looked at his wife warningly while keeping a tight hold on his daughter, who was slung on his shoulder as they ran away. "Will the blue demons kill us, Papa?" Bylinska asked, training her innocent but fearful eyes on him. The screaming from his people reached a new high, and Mirlan could feel the ground underneath his feet tremble as the Kree rained down bombs on his people. "They won't, Billy. Xandar will save us." Mirlan gasped, running with everything he had towards the tree-line, desperately hoping for an escape. "Xandar will save us all." Suddenly, a scream came from his front as the tree-line began to fall away as if it were cut down, and then people started falling one by one. Marlon caught his wife by her elbow and dived with his daughter to the ground in front of him, erupting in a violent explosion. He heard his daughter scream in fright as he dived to the ground, but he shielded her with his body. He could see his people explode into a shower of blood, bones and pieces of flesh under the barrage of plasma fire. He shielded his daughter's eyes and huddled with his wife as he stared in horror at the melted red skin of one of his neighbors in front of him, staring into the sky in horror. He could see one lone eye hanging out of the socket while the other side of the face was melted away. Piles of corpses littered the ground before him, and he could feel more were being made into corpses. The dead started to fall into the top of his family. Marlon covered his daughter's mouth with his hand to keep her quiet. But he saw the Kree soldiers come towards them in numbers with their plasma guns and armored ground troops. He desperately hoped the Kree wouldn't notice them, but he saw some of them turn their weapons on the downed people. Marlon closed his eyes as he heard the weapons discharge and waited for the inevitable. But nothing ever happened to his befuddlement. When Marlon opened his eyes, he found a wall of energy before him, shielding his family and people from the onslaught of Kree weapons. "You know, I thought the Kree could be taken prisoners and reasoned with." A firm voice broke through the eerily quiet battlefield, making Marlon and other survivors to look up. He saw a being in shiny silver armor floating down gently from the sky. "Is that an Asgardian?" Marlon wondered, having heard stories about the gods of Asgard since his childhood. "But you've shown there is only one way to end this war. If it's death you want, I'll give you death," the floating man said before twin beams of bright blue energy blasted out of his eyes and cut through the assembled Kree warriors in an instant. Syrian tilted his head slightly and let the blast of energy pass harmlessly into the sky while his eyes zeroed in on the hovering vehicle carrying Kree soldiers. A red-hot beam blasted out of his eyes and carved through flesh, bones, and metal. The troop transport vehicle exploded with a bright flare, and shrapnel scattered to all corners. Anything that came towards the direction of the slaves was held back by the energy shield he projected. He didn't give the Kree ground forces time to recover from the shock he delivered. He immediately flew towards them and began smashing, kicking and punching the soldiers until they all fell unceremoniously on the ground, never to rise again. Some of them had their bones crushed, while others were pretty much dead. Within the span of a few minutes, an entire battalion of the Kree forces was wiped out. Thanks to his enhanced senses, he could feel a few Kree soldiers were alive. He could also see several Kerlorians were in bad shape, and they needed medical attention. "Star Killer, do you read?" Syrian spoke through the comms. "We are receiving you, Captain," Officer Andrew responded. "Mark my current position. There are a lot of Kerlorians who need medical attention, and there are a few Kree survivors. We have your location marked, sir. Once we finish the mining, we'll have a medic crew transported to the area," Officer Andrew said through the comms. "Good." Syrian cut the comms before turning his attention to the Kerlorians. "Optima, dispatch 2 healer discs." The suit of armor came under flux as 2 healer discs floated away from the area near his shoulder blades. The healer's discs went around and started giving emergency medical care to those suffering from critical injuries. While this was going on, Syrian gathered the Kree soldiers who were alive and, with the help of the uninjured Kerlorians, he bound them against a tree. "Are you from Xander?" a small Kerlorian girl asked him as many of their people gathered around him. "I'm afraid not. My name is Syrian. I'm a Kryptonian." Syrian knelt on one knee and patted the small pink-skinned child's head. "Now, what is your name?" "My name is Bylinska," the little girl said excitedly and introduced her family. "This is my father and mother." "I see. You have a wonderful family, Bylinska." Syrian smiled. "My name is Marlon, my lord. This is my wife, Nara." The 2 adults bowed as Syrian stood to his full height. "Your people need not worry, Marlon. My fleet will lay waste to the Kree, and all enslaved Kerlorians will be released from the yoke of slavery. For now, you must salvage any weapons you can and defend this position from any stray Kree soldiers," Syrian said reluctantly. The sorry state of the Kerlorians made him queasy to ask this of them. These people were not in a state to fight the Kree soldiers, who had super strength and speed. But he was just one man, and despite his great power, he couldn't be in multiple places at once. There were many more ghettos under assault from the Kree, and he was needed there. "We'll do what we can, Lord Syrian," Marlon said with a low bow. "You won't be alone. My fleet will dispatch aid to your people in a short while once they complete orbital defenses. After that, my ground forces will obliterate the Kree and free the rest of your people." "You have my word," Syrian promised. "We thank you, Lord Syrian. But you must be cautious when you face the Kree governor of this planet. Her name is Faenia. She is a witch with power over the mind and energy. She is a cunning manipulator," Marlon warned. "Thank you for the information, Marlon." Syrian nodded as he floated into the sky and cast his senses out. He picked up on a Kree battalion moving towards another Kerlorian camp a few clicks away behind a row of green hills. Without wasting time, he shot through the air with a sonic boom. He arrived just in time to see the Kree forces reaching the edge of the civilian encampment. He landed on the ground with a bang, kicking up dust and blowing back the closest Kree soldiers with the blast. A couple of Kree soldiers were quick to react and blasted him with consistent plasma fire using their guns. He projected an energy shield that absorbed the blasts while his suit gave him a vibranium spear on verbal command. His super speed allowed him to appear before the 2 Kree soldiers in the blink of an eye. He slammed them with the spear with full force against their chests, lifting them off their feet and slamming them against the trees. One Kree soldier rushed at him with a vibrasword, but he captured the soldier's forearm in a vice grip. He could feel the Kree warrior exert as much strength against him, but Syrian didn't budge. "Surprised to encounter someone stronger than you?" Syrian asked with a raised eyebrow. The Kree let out an angry yell and made to punch his face. But Syrian responded with a headbutt that cracked the skull open of the Kree soldier. With a shower of blue blood, the soldier crumpled to the floor dead. There was an eerie silence in the area as the other Kree soldiers stared at Syrian with fear. "I offer you this once. Lay down your arms and surrender. If you do that, you'll live. Syrian offered. We are the Kree of Hala. We do not surrender, one of the soldiers bellowed, unsheathing a vibrasword. Seeing this bravado from one of their own, the other Kree soldiers did the same and readied themselves for a fight. Okay, then. Thank you for volunteering to test my powers. Syrian thought as he floated a few feet off the ground and angled his vibranium spear energized with the light force. Bright flashes of light filled the forest area as they battled without holding back. 15 minutes later, Syrian watched dispassionately as the Kree battalion lay dead before him, with the exception of a few. Some had their bones broken or even their limbs sliced off by his laser beams. They lay on the ground, unable to make a move and waiting for a swift death, which never came. He saw one stray Kree soldier crawl away towards the Kerlorian ghetto. But one intact Kree soldier was in his grasp, trying desperately to claw at Syrian's hold on the Kree's throat. A lot of Kree bravery, isn't that so? Syrian asked, letting out a derisive snort, eyeing the captured Kree leader in his grasp. Syrian rose high into the air so that he was floating above the tallest trees in the forest while his grip around the Kree soldier's neck remained firm. You think you've won? You and your kin will be pummeled to death by the Kree accusers. Hala will send her strongest fleets and hunt you and your kind across the stars, the Kree soldier choked out while squirming in his grasp. They already tried once. I don't think they'd be in a hurry to lose more of their ships and soldiers like last time. Syrian said with a chuckle. So, have you given any thought about what I asked? Surrender and cooperate with me. If you give valuable intel, I'll make sure to make your stay with us very comfortable. Die, Asgardian scum, the Kree spat at him in defiance. How often do I have to tell you I'm not Asgardian? Syrian said in exasperation. You know what, I don't even care anymore. You lot are better served as manure for this land. Syrian said with a scowl. Twin blasts of finely tuned laser beams cut through the head of the Kree soldier in his grasp, killing the blue-skinned soldier instantly. He let go of his hold on the Kree's neck and watched it fall to the ground below. Then he turned his eyes on the lone injured soldier, trying to crawl away undetected. He could see a bunch of Kerlorians standing guard at the edge of their camp with sticks and stones in their hands, warily looking at him and at the Kree soldier crawling towards them. Oh, what the hell? He'll be as useless as the rest of them, Syrian thought. He threw his spear straight towards the Kree soldier, and it found its mark. A wet squelching sound and a painful grunt were picked up by his sensitive ears once his spear found its mark. Syrian floated down next to the impaled body of the Kree soldier and pulled the spear out. A simple spin of the spear in his hand shook away the blue blood sticking to its silver surface. He rose to the air and noticed more Kerlorians coming out of hiding. Kerlorians, you are free from Kree oppression. There is a battalion of decimated Kree soldiers behind this tree line. You'll find weapons that can defend your home. Syrian jabbed his thumb at the row of trees behind him. But that simple assurance wasn't enough to earn the trust of the enslaved Kerlorian populace. He had to stay back for a few minutes and convince them to believe his word. When they finally came around and looted the functioning weapons from the Kree, he left the village's defense in their capable hands. Syrian liberated 5 more villages from the Kree attack and was on his way to the next when Star Killer opened comm channels with him. Sir, we've finished mining the cislunar space. We're about to launch the landing force once the Sentinels return. Officer Andrew informed him. Good. Any update on the fighters sweeping for orbital defense systems? Syrian asked, floating high in the sky. So far, they haven't found anything substantial. But they took out multiple long-range communication installations hidden in between hilltops. I see. Anything to report on our recon missions? Syrian asked. "We've found some of the major Kree bases, sir. The energy signatures that our sensors picked up from some of them suggest they are bunkers and armories." "Very well. Send me an updated map of the continent with markers on these bunkers. I'll see whether I can lend a hand to our fighters in their precision bombing missions." "Yes, sir. The map should be uploaded into your suit. We'll keep updating it for any changes," said Officer Andrew. Syrian cut the comms and made himself appear before another Kerlorian slave camp and proceeded to liberate them. Almost halfway into beating up the minor Kree force sent to decimate the camp, he saw the Star Killer enter C-24's atmosphere. The skies darkened, and thunderstorms brewed as the giant ship entered the continent's airspace. "Those idiots removed the shield for a dramatic entry," Syrian muttered, shaking his head at the antics of his men. He went back to concentrating on destroying the Kree ground forces in earnest, leaving the progress of his ground forces in the hands of the Marines and cover from Star Killer. He found himself fighting against a substantial ground force of the Kree military on his next stop. Unlike the previous battles, this Kree force was suitably backed up by powerful artillery, automatic guns, and plasma cannons. Syrian fired a long beam of white plasma, shattering the ballistic warhead that came his way. He shrugged off the small bolts of plasma or, in some cases, outright dodged them while he rained down a continuous stream of concentrated plasma beams on their cannons and other heavy machinery. Summoning his spear into hand, Syrian threw it straight at the missile silos aiming at him with their missiles. The explosion produced from the destruction of the missile silo rocked the ground and blew the Kree soldiers away. But the Kree were formidable warriors. They were quick on their feet and engaged him in plasma gunfire in quick order. As Syrian dodged a constant stream of plasma assault, he also gathered the light force into the palms of his hands and shaped the energy into constructs. Once he was suitably prepared, he threw the gathered light force energy at the enemy. Little bolts of light force punched through the armor of the Kree soldiers with their razor-sharp tips. The rest of their comrades didn't even flinch and continued their assault as if nothing had happened. Syrian swooped in and punched away a Kree soldier. The Kree soldier flew a full 10 meters before getting smashed into a boulder. Another soldier tried a full-body tackle, a new strategy employed by a Kree soldier based on what he had seen so far. While the soldier earned some points for taking a different approach, Syrian was unmoved. The Kree were naturally blessed with super strength and speed, but they were nowhere near his level. He was still nowhere near Superman-level powers, as he had only 5 years under his belt as a Kryptonian under a yellow star. But he was near that strength and speed, considering the bright, shining sun in the sky. Therefore, he didn't move an inch from the Kree soldier's tackle. Instead, Syrian slammed his knee into the abdomen of the Kree soldier, lifting him up under the power of his blow. He did a quick spin and slammed his right foot into the Kree's chest, propelling the soldier across the ground and slamming into the burning remains of the missile silo. He jumped into the burning crater and took back the spar before promptly throwing it into the chest of a Kree soldier, pinning the guy against a troop carrier. A concentrated blast of plasma from his eyes made the carrier explode with a loud bang. The spear jetted out of the carrier upon the vehicle's explosion, which he caught easily in his hand. He made quick work of the remaining Kree soldiers, using his super speed to knock them out and sometimes kill them. After all, their capacity to hold prisoners was minimal. As Syrian prepared to find the next spot, his ears caught a stray rumbling sound from a few cliffs east. Using his enhanced vision, he picked up on the movement of several troop carriers with Kree soldiers. But didn't do anything as a pair of fighters whistled past his position straight toward the Kree troops. The fighters rained a barrage of plasma bolts on the Kree before one of the fighters dropped a boatload of incendiary bombs on the enemy. The consecutive booming sounds from the area with black smoke billowing out into the sky were quite a sight to witness. The attack decimated the Kree soldiers, and the fighters took a round before moving to another location. Nice timing. Now, let's see where else I can find a few Kree to blow up. Syrian thought as he took to the skies. Phaenia glared into the open sky as enemy fighters streaked across the sky, raining fire and death upon her people. Bring that fighter down. She snarled, pointing a finger at the fighter craft, which dropped a slew of incendiary bombs on her troops trying to mount a proper defense on their mountain stronghold. The blast from the bombs made her cringe and forced her eyes away as her soldiers were blown to bits or burned away before her eyes. The artillery piece behind her came alive and began to unload rapid fire at the fighter. Phaenia pursed her lips as she watched the fighter maneuver around the energy bolts. The occasional few that came close splashed harmlessly against the shield that flared up around the fighter craft. Phaenia dived out of the way as the fighter made a quick round and opened up its guns on them. She dived behind the cover of a metal door and weathered the return fire while her fellow Kree soldiers opened fire with the artillery and simple blaster guns in their hands. But as usual, it didn't make much difference against a shielded craft. A few more Kree soldiers fell dead under the return fire from the enemy, making her look at the ruins of their mountain base forlornly. If the cowardly enemy hadn't attacked their base from the orbit and caved in the entrance to their base, she'd have taken a fighter from the base and shown these cowards a Kree's true might. Unfortunately, the blast doors were covered in large rocks, making it nearly impossible to get inside. Even if she found some way to get inside, she wasn't certain what kind of damage befell the base's interior. After the orbital bombardment, there was no communication from the people inside the base. Either the orbital bombardment utterly destroyed the base, or their comms were jammed. She was hedging closer to the first rather than the latter after hours had passed. Her attempts to ascertain the status of her base were in tatters, especially after the enemy started the assault on her base and the surrounding area. She had hoped the enemy would be busy rescuing the Kerlorians under assault by her soldiers, but somehow, that part of the plan didn't work as well as she hoped. The ground before her tore open from the cannon fire of the enemy fighters. When the dust settled, she saw the artillery gun remain intact, but the gunner was dead on the ground. "You! Take the artillery gun and bring that enemy down," she ordered a random soldier while she charged the blaster in her hand and took aim at the enemy craft circling back. But before her order could be carried out or one more shot could be fired, twin bright red beams sliced through the artillery gun, rendering it useless. What? Phaenia gaped at the sudden destruction of the one piece of weapon that could have brought down the enemy. The ground shook as a man fell from the sky. The ground around the man's feet tore up under the force of impact, kicking up dust and stone. A Kree soldier immediately opened fire on the man with his blaster, but to no avail. The body armor on the man simply absorbed the bolts of energy, and the man threw a punch that lifted the Kree soldier off his feet and blew him away from the mountain in the blink of an eye. As the other soldiers rushed towards the enemy with battle cries, Phaenia held back and observed from a safe distance. She didn't climb through the Kree ranks by her sheer strength alone. She knew when to fight and when to stand back from a fight. Observing the fight that was unfolding before her eyes, she knew there was nothing that could be done. The silver-armored man was toying with her soldiers. The ease with which the man was striking down her soldiers showed that he was no ordinary creature. The Kree were blessed with speed and strength, allowing them to dominate most races in the known universe. But their enemy was easily stopping their attacks and dispatching them faster. This is no Xandarian. This is an Asgardian or one of the many gods that inhabits the universe. Phaenia thought with a grimace. When the enemy kicked away the last Kree soldier from the mountain, she dropped the weapons in her hand and raised her hands in surrender. Her eyes fell on the screaming Kree soldier who was falling down the cliff until the screaming stopped altogether. "I surrender," Phaenia managed to say with gritted teeth, staring into the stormy gray eyes of the enemy. "Who are you?" "I'm Phaenia, governor of this outpost appointed by the Kree High Council. Are you the highest-ranking officer of all free forces on this planet?" "I am," she answered briskly while preparing herself to assault the enemy's mind. "Order your forces to surrender and disarm themselves. If they don't, they'll be treated as hostiles and dealt with extreme prejudice." Faina gulped when she saw the enemy's eyes glow amber red, making the air sizzle with heat. The power she could feel at that moment was overwhelming, and her own psionic powers fizzled out as fear set in her mind. "Not now. I'll lose," Faina thought, gulping in fear. She activated the comms on her forearm, establishing a channel to her fellow Kree warriors. "This is Governor Faina speaking. All Kree forces are to disarm themselves and offer surrender." "Good move." The glowing red around the enemy's eyes dimmed. "My name is Syrian Vex, and I accept your surrender." Syrian observed as the Sentinel troops dragged a huge ring from Star Killer's carriage hold into the open. The huge metal ring was the culmination of his work with the Kryptonian Phantom Drive and the adjustments he made with the jump drive he took from Kree ships. The space bridge he set up on Earth for ease of transport between Corin and California was now scaled up after careful research. The space bridge was now repurposed for interstellar travel rather than for instantaneous travel within the reaches of a planet. The need for an interstellar space bridge became urgent when Syrian realized he lacked the troops to defend C-24 from a full-scale Kree invasion. Despite his powers and the current disposition of his forces, he was acutely aware they couldn't defend the planet without some serious casualties. The Kree Empire, with its vast territory and destructive power, posed a significant threat that required a strategic response. While he had the necessary weapons capability and a modest number of super soldiers, the Kree Empire was vast, and its destructive power was scary enough to warrant being cautious when dealing with such a powerful interstellar empire. They could deploy a weapon aimed at destroying the planet or even the star of the system. To avoid such a catastrophic event from affecting those under his command, Syrian expanded upon the space bridge and came up with a way to safely and quickly evacuate everyone from C-24. That was how he came up with a huge ring transponder that transmits energy and matter through the folds of space. Unlike the jump drives or phantom drives, the new space bridge was designed to transfer matter and energy to a corresponding ring transponder plugged into its network. The inspiration for this innovative concept came to Syrian when he stumbled upon the 9th season of the Stargate series on the Sci-Fi Channel. The large gate network that could fold space and facilitate the instant transport of matter and energy immediately caught his attention, inspiring him to make the gate transponder. The initial space bridge he designed was only capable of working within a limited range, and it required an intricate satellite network to ensure the precision of the matter and energy stream. The new gate transponders he developed had none of those shortcomings and complexity. Of course, there was one small problem. The gate could only sustain the portal for 15 minutes before the cooling process forced it to shut down. The immense energy requirements for sustaining an interstellar portal were enormous, and the cooling systems involved in preventing the collapse of the gate's superstructure were similarly taxing and time-consuming. Any delay or malfunction in this process could have catastrophic consequences for the mission. As the Sentinel bot stabilized the transponder gate, Syrian sprang into action and worked to set it up with 3 arc reactors running at peak capacity. On the other hand, the bots diligently worked to install the cooling manifold to the gate. After 10 minutes of intense work, the gate transponder was finally ready. Without further ado, Syrian switched the gate online, and the negative space inside the ring crackled with energy as space folded within itself. The process was a testament to Syrian's ingenuity and determination, as well as the advanced technology at his disposal. "Sir, we are getting a positive reading from the other gate," a Sentinel bot working the gate's system said. "Send the access codes. Engage the shield and stabilize the portal," Syrian ordered. A portal formed between the giant-sized ring with a bright flare of white light and a swishing sound. A thin white film of energy formed in the negative space inside the ring, creating a spectacle that left everyone present in awe. Once the security codes were received on their end, the gate's shield was dropped on their end while making space for new arrivals. The first thing to emerge from the portal was a small drone, followed by large trucks and tanks pulling orbital defense equipment necessary for C-24's safety. The cannons were dismantled into 3 parts and required to be reassembled for operation, but that could be easily arranged. More Sentinel bots marched out of the portal, carrying tools, construction materials, food, medicine, and other pieces of equipment in huge crates to set up their new base of operations in C-24. As they worked, a sense of accomplishment filled the air, a testament to their resilience and determination in the face of adversity. A truckload of food and medicinal supplies came next. Along came Bruce Banner. "So, this is a whole new planet," Bruce said as he jumped down from the truck. "Not really all that different. Look up," Syrian said, pointing to the sky above. Syrian chuckled when he saw the shock on Bruce's face. 2 moons were seen in the blue sky, and one of the moons was far closer to the planet. The closeness of the moon offered a visual marvel in the sky. The position of the sun was such that the moon could be seen quite clearly from the planet's surface, even during the day. "Whoa! This looks like Da Vinci painted a masterpiece on the sky," Bruce said in awe. "You think this might be a good place to set up shop?" Syrian asked as he joined Bruce, setting his eyes on the beautiful view in the sky. Syrian had to admit he was already leaning heavily on this planet as his favorite instead of Earth. There were no intolerably distracting sounds on the planet that were overwhelming his senses like it was on Earth. That alone was a huge plus point. Even though he had learned to suppress that sensory overload for the most part, he still felt the relative peace on C-24 to be a refreshing experience. A low population is its own blessing, Syrian mused. "I think this might just be a good place to hang my coat, provided the space empires don't bomb us all into atoms," Bruce said. "We'll make sure that never comes to pass, Bruce." Syrian patted his friend's shoulder. "Now, come. We have much work to do." Syrian watched dispassionately as the Kree prisoners were escorted towards the holding cells in Corin through the gate transponder. It was decided keeping all Kree prisoners on the planet was a bad idea. Therefore, it was decided to keep some prisoners in Corin in the cryo chamber. Fortunately, the same facilities that held the Wakandan prisoners were now free to hold the Kree prisoners from C-24. The Kree leadership, however, were held in C-24 for ease of access. After all, they had a lot of interrogation to do to gain intelligence on the disposition of Kree forces scattered throughout the universe. Dark energy spectroscopy sensors were installed in key locations throughout the planet to keep close observation of space anomalies and distant star systems. With the deep space scanners, he hoped to pull the usual jump points of the Kree warships close to the star system he was occupying and mount defenses around those areas. Now comes the real work, Syrian thought. Capturing the planet was one thing, but holding it was entirely another feat. There were a gazillion problems in C-24, and he was confident those problems would not go away anytime soon. The most prominent problem was the shortage of food. He'd have been better prepared if he had had better intelligence reports from the spy satellites he had sent to observe C-24. When the Kree realized their critical military assets were destroyed by the orbital bombardment, they started destroying their food supplies and set the farmlands ablaze to deny any resources. It was a scorched earth policy, and the Kree were somewhat effective in carrying it out. The Krylorians had survived the assault on their lives, but their farmlands and homes were burnt down. This resulted in the next crisis, which was the lack of housing for the former slaves. These problems were exacerbated by the onset of winter on C-24, which required immediate solutions. The Krylorians were survivors, but even they couldn't hold on when they starved in the cold. So, Syrian visited each of the Krylorian villages to see with his own eyes. He had the people in those villages who lost their homes transported to the Kree stronghold in the mountains. Since the Kree were imprisoned in cryo chambers, he was all too happy to give their lodgings to the Krylorians. But that was not a solution for the long term. The Kree stronghold housed a significant amount of Kree technology and weaponry. He had found a lot of gliders and computers within this stronghold. This made the contents extremely valuable. The data that could be recovered from the place would give them valuable insight into the Kree holdings spread across the universe. The stronghold was built by hollowing out a rocky hill with many layers inside. This made it a security risk, as many of those layers of the stronghold were not adequately vetted by his men or the drones. It was a risk he had to take for now, as he wasn't about to condone a large group of people staying in the wilderness as the weather worsened. There was one option he hadn't considered yet. The Dauntless is en route with the Krylorian refugees. Michelle reported as she stood by his side to watch the sunrise from the cliff of the Kree stronghold. Their numbers? He asked curiously. As of now, it stands now, this is the count. Michelle activated her armband, and it projected a number. 128,578. Syrian muttered aghast, staring at the number with wide eyes. We can't hold this many people in the stronghold. We might have the capacity to give them lodgings aboard the Star Killer, Michelle said with a thoughtful look. No, Syrian immediately disagreed. We can't use our ships to give refuge to these people. Those ships are essential for the defense of the planet. Then what do you suggest we do? We can't host them, nor can we feed them. Michelle raised the crux of the issue. Syrian could only observe silence as he couldn't think of any immediate solution to the food problem. He had successfully conquered a planet, but now he was faced with the reality of holding a planet and all that entailed. We'll have to make alternate arrangements. We need to transport food and other essential supplies from Earth to C-24. But we don't have that many supplies in our base, Michelle argued. Then we must procure it from a source on Earth, said Syrian with frustration, knowing the risks of such a venture. That involves all kinds of risks. It won't go unnoticed if we suddenly buy huge volumes of food and other essentials, Michelle reminded him. What choice do we have? Syrian threw his hands up in frustration as he paced back and forth. We can't use the same medicine the humans use on the Krylorians. So, we must ensure they get nutritious food. Besides, this is a temporary situation. I'm sure we can find a good place on the planet where we can relocate these people. I'll try my best to find a supplier. Michelle said with a thoughtful frown, I still have contacts in certain places that could help us. Good. Syrian rubbed his forehead tiredly. Any resources you want will be provided by Optima. I will oversee the developments here. Michelle nodded and left to activate the space bridge while he stayed back and helped the refugees that were already present in the Kree stronghold. When the Dauntless finally came with the rest of the Krylorian refugees, the stronghold could no longer host the numbers, which forced them to look for alternate lodgings. Thankfully, the Krylorians understood the situation and were extremely cooperative. Since he was hesitant to use any antibiotics or any kind of human-made medicine on the Krylorian population, there was not a great deal of need for medical supplies. But food from Earth had its own downsides. The Krylorians might not be compatible with bacteria, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides present in Earth's food products. For now, he was not deploying Earth's medicines without some detailed experimentation. Therefore, Syrian employed the healer discs en masse to restore the Krylorians to peak physical condition. The Vita Ray bombardments were a concentrated blast of energy that imparted energy into cells to facilitate self-healing. However, he was only using those on people with minimal bodily health, as determined by the medical tricorder. For the moment, he had to dip into the reserve stocks for his men and judiciously share them with the Krylorians. By the time the twin moons of C-24 became visible in the sky and night fell on the continent, a slew of tents sprang up around the Kree stronghold. For the time being, the former KRYPTONIan slaves were resting with their lives intact. Their hunger was temporarily sated by the rations that Sirian brought to C-24 and what they could salvage from the planet. He had already sent out search parties to look for more food on the planet to keep their food stores from drying out until alternate supply lines could be established. The next day, things were less hectic. They still hadn't solved the food shortage crisis, but they had seen some improvements in the medicine aspect. The KRYPTONIans had experience with gathering natural medicines. Therefore, they made the request for aid, which he was happy to provide. Their transport vehicles and the few Kree troop transporters they salvaged were used to ferry the KRYPTONIan medics to gather herbs and seeds from around the planet. Sirian also sent several of his drones to learn the art of natural medicine practiced by the KRYPTONIan medics. It also helped in recording the flora and fauna of the planet. He also sent several sentinels equipped with scanners to unearth any other secret hangars of the Kree Empire on the planet. There were reconnaissance missions arranged to look for survivors in the planet's forests and caves, which was no easy task under the circumstances. The only good thing that was going his way was the KRYPTONIans being so cooperative. It was thanks to that cooperation that he made an important discovery. "Gravitonium," Sirian muttered. Cold winds blew against his face as Sirian stared down at the inconspicuous mine hidden by an intricate cave system and a carpet of snow. He held a scanner against the entrance of the mine, and the energy levels were off the charts. The fuel that fires the war machine of the Kree Empire. Sirian muttered as he stared into the dark mine. How did this mine go unnoticed for this long? He asked curiously, looking at his KRYPTONIan companion. "We never revealed the mine's find to the Kree, Blessed One. We knew what it'd mean for our people should we have revealed the mine. You can call me Sirian," Sirian said, smiling gently at his companion. "The Blessed One is humble," the KRYPTONIan said with a bowed head, making Sirian sigh. The KRYPTONIans' cooperation was only triumphed by their fanatic worship. It was the same kind of worship he saw daily amongst his human companions. Only very few were willing to accept the truth of his nature of existence. Everyone else believed he was their angel sent from heaven, despite evidence to the contrary. Of course, he was aware that worship could turn on a dime if the KRYPTONIans starved under his watch. Sirian opened his armband and opened communications with the base. "Optima, mark my position. There is a gravitonium mine near my position. Send word to Corin that we need mining drones," Sirian ordered. "Yes, sir." "Any word from Michelle?" he asked, hoping to get some good news on that front. "I'm afraid not. Miss Michelle has yet to establish contact," said Optima from the other end of the comm channel. Sirian sighed in frustration before turning to his KRYPTONIan guide. "Come, Gonor. Let's return to base unless you have more ground-shattering secrets to share." "No, Blessed One." Gonor dipped his head. Sirian rolled his eyes as he walked back to the transporter. The cockpit opened as he neared the transporter and climbed aboard the smaller ship designed to transport construction materials. He sagged into the pilot's seat while Gonor took a seat beside him. The engine started firing up, and it slowly hovered above the ground before he applied the boosters, which made it take off into the sky. As they journeyed back to the stronghold, they made some stops along the way to dump the construction materials and build Bailey bridges across several rivers. The gate flared to life with a blue barrier. "The bridge has a stable connection, sir," said one of the operatives monitoring the gate. Sirian just nodded while the energy barrier surrounding the gate was dismissed once they received proper security codes from the other end. Michelle stepped out of the gate, and that brought some relief to him. "Please tell me you have good news," Sirian said, looking hopefully at Michelle. "It could be good news. It's conditional?" Syrian looked at her in confusion. It is. Michelle nodded as she stood before him while the gate remained open. All right. What is it you have found? I have two options for you. I can give you a short-term supply of wheat, rice, spice, and fruits. You name it, and it is yours. But that supply can be cut off because of the uncertain economy due to war. All right. What about the other option? Syrian asked. The other option guarantees the unrestricted supply of grains, millets, and anything that we need for as long as we want. That sounds like a good deal fit for our needs. Syrian said with a thoughtful look, but I guess there is a catch. There is. Michelle sighed. They promise complete discretion, but they have a long list of demands. They're under the impression that I'm working for the CIA or SHIELD. So, their demands are quite steep. What are their demands? Syrian asked with a frown. Who are they anyway? I reached out to a couple of old contacts in the Mossad. They are experts and wield great influence in certain South Asian polities. Michelle said with a tired sigh, but first, they want to meet you. You told them about me? Syrian asked with a raised eyebrow. No. They wanted to meet my boss. Michelle said with a roll of her eyes, I never told them anything about you or exactly why we need the resources in the first place. Syrian frowned as he pondered the choices before him. Ultimately, it was not a difficult decision to make, considering the KRYPTONIan refugees depended on food from Earth until they could reclaim their farmlands. Fine. Syrian decided with a sigh, arrange a meeting with these people. I'll hear their demands. It was not the demands that he was worried about. He worried about how to extract these food consignments from Earth without compromising their capabilities and anonymity. It was not as if he were the only one capable of tracking suspicious transactions using shell companies and shady accounts. Syrian observed Earth from a safe distance aboard the command bridge of the Dauntless. The planet looked beautiful, like a bright blue sapphire orb in a room full of darkness. It was not his idea to be far from C-24 at this time, but he had to because he had an important meeting. C-24 lacked the warm temperatures and the quantity of greenhouse gases to sustain a growing population of humans and KRYPTONians. If Krypton had faced the trouble of overexploiting natural resources, C-24's problem would have been that it was not sufficiently exploited. Studying the atmospheric composition of C-24 had shown him the need to burn a whole lot of fossil fuels. Because the planet's temperature was so low, it was not sustainable to produce enough food year-round for a growing population. The Kree overcame this by simply culling the KRYPTONian population, which left them with fewer mouths to feed without compromising the mining operations on the planet. However, that wasn't a policy he intended to continue, as he had no intention of treating C-24 as a mining planet. The whole situation showed the impracticality of some of the claims being made by certain activist groups. Even he was influenced by some misinformation on fossil fuels until he came face to face with the situation in C-24. When I get my hands on those climate activists, I'll bury them in the desert. Syrian thought, glaring at the continent of Europe and a portion of the Americas. Those idiots were more likely to kill the agricultural yield of the planet than save it from some random climatic shifts due to rising temperatures. Rising temperatures would become a problem for Earth, but he suspected the sun had more involvement in it than most people thought. But all of that was not going to be his problem anymore. Now that he had a stable base in C-24, he could rest easy. We've got all the satellite systems under surveillance. We're ready, sir, Michelle said as she stood by him to watch Earth from the glass panel. He turned away from making silly plans to off some random activists and focused on the matter. All right, then. You have your task, and I have mine. Syrian nodded at Michelle and made his way towards the landing bay. Are you sure you want to do this? You know what they did? Michelle asked one last time. We need to diversify our supplies without ticking off other major players. They suit our needs perfectly. Do you think they'll agree after what happened? Michelle asked, sounding not so confident with the plan. Oh, I know they will. We have the upper hand in the negotiations anyway. Leave the rest to me while you focus on your mission. Syrian said confidently. Very well. Best of luck, sir. Michelle nodded. Syrian reached the landing bay, where he was ejected into outer space. The pressure variation dragged him outside the Dauntless as he floated in the vacuum weightlessly. The only downside was that he was getting the collective sensory overload of trillions of sounds into his ears, even from this distance. But he pushed that sensory overload aside with practiced ease as a mask formed, covering his face with its glass flaring up with a display function. The path forward is charted, sir. This route should avoid all observatories from Earth and the satellites. Optima's voice chimed in his ears. Perfect. Syrian muttered before he pushed himself off straight into Earth's atmosphere, following the path charted for him. He blasted through the space at full speed, and it wasn't long before he started feeling resistance from Earth's atmosphere. He powered up his flight speed and quickly reached his destination. He hovered over the continent of Africa and saw his guests arrive on time. Without further ado, he blasted straight towards the meeting spot. Heroic landing achieved, Syrian childishly said in his mind as his feet slammed into the ground, kicking up dust and turning over the soil around him under the force of his landing. His eyes fell on the king of Wakanda and his royal guard standing behind a force field. He couldn't find the Black Panther anywhere near. Either Chaka didn't inform his son or ordered his son to stay in the city. Syrian mused. King Chaka. I extend you my greetings. Syrian said, nodding curtly at the monarch. Syrian of House Vex. Chaka nodded warily. Why have you come today? For trade, Syrian said, simply shrugging his shoulders. Our trade pact was met with the transfer of vibranium in the amounts you demanded. Chaka said, looking far less happy to be talking about his precious metal once again. Yes, and you held up your end of the bargain. I'm not talking about vibranium but the trade of other goods and services. I don't understand. Chaka frowned at him. After our less than cordial meeting, I came to realize that remaining on Earth might lead to more such points of friction. So, in the interest of peace, I have decided to relocate to another planet. In the interest of peace, you say? Chaka asked suspiciously. Don't get me wrong, I do love your odd little planet and the games you all play in the shadows and occasionally in plain sight. But our recent encounter has made me realize the need to put some distance from the local issues. Syrian said delicately. So, you'll stop arming the Westerners? Chaka asked with a healthy dose of skepticism. That is the plan, yes. Syrian said with a straight face. The truth was that he hadn't decided yet. While he wasn't explicitly selling weapons, he still had a deal with Hammer Industries, and through them, he had been helping fine-tune their already existing weapon designs. He was also involved in modifying S.H.I.E.L.D's air power as a first step in expanding the presence of a space-fighting force. While those contracts would come under the aegis of defense contracts, he was not willing to put a stop to it all on short notice. Those contracts gave him access to certain supply chains that had served rather well in creating his own satellite communication channels and microchips and, most importantly, access to information he otherwise wouldn't have. At the same time, he was determined to scale down step by step and reduce his involvement over the coming years because his area of focus was now different. He would still keep some contact because Earth was ground zero for some events, and he was already getting reports of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra duking it out in the shadows. Two nearly equally powerful spy organizations were fighting, and it was a great opportunity in his eyes. He could gain much from this fight, and Syrian was not one to waste such an opportunity. Fury was playing it safe, but he suspected this uneasy peace wouldn't last long. While the fight hadn't spilt out into the open, it was dangerously close to happening. Hydra, after all, was no simple enemy to be taken down despite the intelligence he handed over to Fury. His intel was most likely incomplete, as Hydra was more than capable of keeping things off the books, so he suspected Fury would have the work cut out for him. So, trade? Why are you not asking for trade with your Western allies? Chaka asked suspiciously. As I said, I'm hoping to limit my involvement with our Western friends. Wakanda has the resources, and you're conveniently hidden from the world market, keeping our trade safely away from prying eyes. For a long moment, Chaka silently stared at him, and Syrian faced the Wakandan king with a carefree smile. He was the least bit bothered because, in the end, he knew Wakanda would agree to open their country to trade. He still had valuable intelligence regarding Wakanda. The Wakandan military might have called back their operatives and replaced them with others, but they can't easily dispose of their land and monetary assets so quickly without raising red flags. What sort of trade are you interested in, Mr. Vex? Chaka asked finally. Syrian grinned as he kicked off the negotiations. Michelle stared at the last of the containers of food being inspected by her subordinates for its contents with a scanner. She and her subordinates were at it for hours as they needed to ensure the grain and other food products were not spoiled before transporting them. She heard the shuffling of feet from behind, and she was soon joined by Asher Blum. You sure you don't want a transport arranged? Asher asked as he stood by her side, watching the containers arranged neatly in columns outside the warehouse. No, Michelle answered with her hands folded behind her back, neatly keeping the tab screen showing the progress of her subordinates out of Asher's view. The last I heard, you were stuck in your home, suffering from a vertebral fracture, living off a pension from the agency. It seems the rumors were wrong, and the agency has you on board in some harebrained scheme, Asher commented. Michelle didn't respond and instead stared ahead. So, what is it this time? Do you want to supply some warlord in Somalia in return for a hit on rival businesses in the region? I heard the Chinese were poking their heads in Africa, Asher said in a sing-song way. I told you I'm no longer working for the agency, Michelle said with a sigh. I find that hard to believe. You went to the trouble of making a solid alibi for Black Ops. I mean, you had me fooled, said Asher with an impressed look. Whatever. Michelle snorted and maintained her silence. You're not lying, Asher hummed after staring at her for a long moment. If not the agency, who else are you working for? Is it the State Department, or have you gone private? Asher asked before his eyes widened comically, and he looked at her in faux horror. Don't tell me you started working for some bleeding heart billionaire and want to solve hunger in Africa. Michelle threw a filthy look at the annoying man. Just shut up, she said with an annoyed look. Fine. Asher raised his hands in surrender. But how are you going to transport these containers? I'd like to know if there is a C-17 fleet out there somewhere. Let me worry about the transport, Asher, Michelle said curtly. Fine, Asher muttered. I have yet to see a peep of the money you promised. You'll get your money once I confirm your goods are up to the standards. Michelle said for the umpteenth time. Thankfully, her subordinates had finished the inspection by then. She took out the tab and tallied all the scanned readings, syncing the data to the officers aboard the Dauntless. Fancy tech, you've got there. Asher chimed in from behind her with his eyes pinned to the screen. Michelle ignored him while concentrating on her work. She looked up from the screen only when her work was done. You should call your banker. The funds have been transferred, said Michelle before neatly folding the tab and securing it on her thigh. Let me check. Michelle waited patiently as Asher confirmed the payment status. While this was going on, she conferred with her subordinates as they returned to her side with the scanning equipment. She made sure all their equipment was accounted for and once again looked over the readings. All right. The payment came through. Asher happily crowed, "So, what is it with this desalination water plant in the Bahamas?" The payment came through from their side. "You don't need to know," Michelle said curtly. "Fine, keep your secrets. Now, I'm interested to see how you transport the containers from here to wherever it is you're." Asher trailed off as a buzzing sound reached his ears. "Do you hear that?" Asher asked, concern flickering in his eyes. "I suggest we take a couple of steps back," Michelle commented as she took a few steps from the containers neatly arranged outside the warehouse. The buzzing sound became much more pronounced, forcing Asher and his men to follow suit as they looked searchingly at the sky from which the sound was coming. Strong gales of wind suddenly appeared, kicking up dust on the ground. Asher's eyes widened as a massive aircraft flickered into view right above his head as if a veil had fallen away. "What the hell?" Asher cried, stumbling back and falling on his back. "Is that an invisible plane?" Several blue streams of light fell on the containers, and they vanished into thin air before everyone's eyes. It was over in 2 minutes, and only dust was left in place of containers filled with food supplies. "We appreciate your timely delivery of all the listed items. It was good doing business with you, Asher." Michelle reached out with her hand, offering the downed man a handshake. "I'll keep in touch." She took a strange sort of glee when she saw the stupefied expression on Asher's face as she was enveloped in a streak of blue light and disappeared from the ground. Michelle took in her changed surroundings within a brightly lit glass chamber. The glass parted, allowing Michelle and her subordinates to enter the dauntless lobby. A drone was waiting outside to receive them. "Are the containers secured in the holding bay?" she asked as she made a beeline for the command bridge. "Yes, Captain," Optima chimed. "Any word from Lord Vex?" "He had a productive meeting with King Chaka. He is ready to meet us at the rendezvous point." Optima chimed. "That's good. Inform him we're on the way to the rendezvous point," Michelle said before she entered the command bridge and took her seat. "Take us out of Earth's atmosphere. When one crisis is averted, another begins," Syrian said with a sigh as he sifted through the readings of the dark energy spectrometers he had placed around the planet to track any FTL entries into their star system. "It must be the Kree," Bruce commented with a troubled look. "Most likely. They must have sent probes to ascertain why they lost communication with one of their mining planets at the far edge of the Empire," Michelle concluded. Syrian stared at the readings shown on the screen where 3 FTL readings were projected. "If they've sent scouts, then we know what is coming next," said Bruce before staring curiously at him. "What do you want to do?" "It was inevitable. We prepared for this," said Syrian, frowning at the screen one last time before activating the orbital defense systems on the planet. Blue dots started appearing on the map of the 3 continents as the ion cannons and other air defense systems came online. "Trace area coverage with a 50-mile radius," Syrian ordered. "We need to increase the coverage of the ion cannons," Syrian observed as Optima showed a scaled display of the area coverage of the cannons. "I agree, but first, we need transportation facilities. We need more roads and mobile ground units if we are hoping to put up a realistic defense against a resourceful hostile enemy," Michelle said her piece. "You're right." Syrian agreed but pointed out the hurdle facing them. "We don't have the workforce capable of accomplishing such a task." "We could use the Sentinels and the drones," Bruce suggested. "No." Syrian immediately shot that down. "I need them to set up our shipyards and upscale mining and other manufacturing operations. Just like we need roads, we need weapons and ships to protect the planet. Then I suggest we use the Krylorians as the workforce," Michelle suggested. Syrian and Bruce stared at Michelle with an uncomfortable look. What? They're living here and consuming the food we give them. They have to chip in for the planet's defense in some way. Michelle stood her ground. I suppose we could ask them if they're willing to contribute. Syrian said slowly, a little bit queasy about asking for their aid after the purge they suffered. It turns out he shouldn't have been bothered by the cooperation from the KRYPTONIans. When he arrived at the camp and requested their help and cooperation, they were eager to chip in any way they could, despite the recent traumatic events. So, the first thing he did was create a layout of roads throughout the 2 continents, which connected the ion cannons he placed around the planet. The Kree were far too negligent in the planet's defense, and Syrian did not intend to make the same mistake. After that, he gave the work to different KRYPTONIan groups to clear the path for roads to be made. Concurrent to that, he renamed the planet Etheria and created a whole new currency from scratch called Ethereum for easy exchange of goods and services. The currency was entirely digital, leaving no burden on his fledgling infrastructure to manage a physical currency. While he provided the KRYPTONIan adult population with a standard nutritious diet and temporary shelter, he let them buy additional goods and services using the new currency. He was also making arrangements to create a central banking system to handle loans and such. Thankfully, he already had the data to build a banking system from scratch, thanks to his earlier stint providing software support for banks on Earth. All he had to do was pull the data from Vex Corp's servers back in Sacramento. While the KRYPTONIans worked on clearing up the area for roads, Syrian dipped into his contacts on Earth to speed up his construction projects in Etheria. To that end, he used his various shell companies to buy up prefabricated roads and other machinery. He also had to source barrels of refined oil, as Earth's machinery only ran on fossil fuels, and he neither had the time nor the resources to modify them in a short time frame. This also meant stocking up special tools and spare parts for the machinery and skilled personnel for repair services. Fortunately, he had recruited a good number of engineer corps from Earth to meet some of the demands. For the next 3 weeks, the rapid progression of roads took place thanks to the enthusiastic participation of the KRYPTONIan workforce. While the KRYPTONIans were not as physically strong as the Kree, they were a hell of a lot better than the humans. The addition of machinery and sophisticated tools made labor much easier for the KRYPTONIans. They worked tirelessly, sometimes exceeding the working hours he set up, as they were motivated to finish as much work as possible. They knew what was at stake when the Kree attacked with overwhelming force. While the pace of construction was to his satisfaction, Syrian wished he could have gone ahead with his original plan of constructing tunneled roads. It'd have provided ample secure transportation in the event of an attack from the Kree ships. However, roads above the ground would also provide a similar transportation route, although they would be less secure. It was less time-consuming to build roads above instead of tunnels, considering the lack of manpower and resources. Even with the security risks, the roads were far better than relying heavily on air travel alone to access the orbital defenses installed on the planet in case a Kree fleet arrived to recapture the planet. "Sir, I just received a transmission from the gate. Miss Foster has arrived from Corin." Optima informed him through the drone floating by his side. Syrian immediately rushed through the deep underground tunnel to reach the base where the gate was now kept. Ever since their sensors picked up Kree scouts, he had moved the gate into a secure and defensible site out of the reach of any long-range weapons the Kree possessed. "I told you it's dangerous to come here." Syrian scowled at Jane, who was casually leaning against a crate full of supplies that his people in Corin were transporting through the gate. "I heard about your extraterrestrial problem and wanted to see it with my own eyes," Jane said while casually flicking her hair. "Getting involved in this fight's not a good idea, Jane. You may have unlocked certain powers, but the Kree Empire is an interstellar entity. There is no telling what kind of forces they'll send our way." Syrian growled with some frustration. "In that case, you'll appreciate that I did not come alone." I brought some help, Jane said with a grin, jabbing her thumb at the gate. What? Syrian asked, seeing nothing happening at the gate. They just missed the timing, that's all. Jane muttered, her cheeks turning pink. A second later, Thena and Gilgamesh stepped through the gate. We heard you could use some help. Thena said, her chin raised and her blonde hair cascading down her shoulders like a shimmering golden veil. It has been a while since we stretched our limbs. This'll be a good exercise. Gilgamesh rubbed his hands with an eager look. Syrian recovered from the shock of seeing the two Eternals. The more the merrier, I suppose. What is so important that you had to drag us to this chamber? We could be helping set up the defenses, you know, Gilgamesh said, a frustrated look on his face. Be a little patient. Syrian muttered as he looked for a black box in the cabinet. You're talking to an Eternal. All we know is patience. Thena grumbled with a roll of her eyes. Aha! Syrian cried when he found the box. He opened the box, took the small black cubes from inside, and presented them to the two Eternals. What is it? Gilgamesh eyed the cubes with a frown. Vibranium. Thena immediately recognized the metal. They're suits meant to enhance your abilities in case the Celestials have an ace up their sleeve. I was working on the project, but I have not completed it. For now, it can provide a layer of protection to your bodies and give you flight capacity. Syrian explained with an excited look. I don't know. Gilgamesh looked hesitant to take the cube while Thena plucked one away from his hand. Go on, take it. Syrian urged. Gilgamesh also took the cube from his hand with a curious look. Press that red dot on its side. When Thena and Gilgamesh followed his instruction, a suit of armor quickly spread over their bodies. There is a panel on your arms to activate flight mode, he explained, pointing at their wrists. Gilgamesh murmured as he poked and prodded at the control panel on his wrist. The anti-grav thrusters in the suit flared up, and Gilgamesh was lifted off his feet. Syrian winced as Gilgamesh slammed into the roof of the room face first. The rest of the suit's functions are not activated for the moment. I'll need some time to tinker with it. Syrian said awkwardly. I shudder to think what else it'll do once it is complete. Thena said with a deadpan look as Gilgamesh fell to the floor with a distinct thud after deactivating flight mode. The flight system works on a neural stimulus from your neural scheme. You'll need some practice to get used to it. But once you do, the suit will just become another part of your body. Training sounds boring. Why don't you hook up the suit's interface with our own and let us have total control? You know we are synthetic robots, Gilgamesh suggested. Yeah, not happening. Syrian shook his head as he explained his reasoning. I don't think connecting the suit with your interface is a good idea. Although I'm confident of severing all of your connections with the Celestials, I like to be cautious. I designed the suit as a failsafe to assist you if the Celestials establish control over your bodies through some means beyond my knowledge. You know. Gilgamesh started to say but was cut off when their base started blaring with alarms. What's that? Thena muttered, are we under attack? Optima? Syrian called. Sir, Miss Jane recalibrated our dark matter spectroscopy program. She made some modifications using her own research and forged her own equipment using the quantum particle generator. Wait a minute. How did she gain access to the particle generator? Syrian asked with a heated look at the virtual face of Optima on his arm panel. Sir, you were the one to give her unrestricted access. Optima reminded him. No, I did not, Syrian said stubbornly. Yes, you did, Optima repeated. Yes, you did. Gilgamesh chimed in, we were there. Your exact words were, give her everything and keep her engaged. I was trying to get her away from the notions of fighting the Kree. She might have awakened certain powers through Terrigenesis, but she is nowhere near ready to go into battle, especially against the Kree. Syrian said with a note of frustration. Seems like you succeeded. Thena commented with a shrug. Yeah, at increasing the chances of blowing us all up. The quantum particle generator is not something to mess with. I have yet to perfect the device. Syrian said with a scowl as they walked across the base towards Jane's location. Miss Jane activated the emergency alarms for some reason, though I don't know why. Optima said on their way to the lab. You didn't ask? Syrian asked with a raised eyebrow while he moved through the corridors faster. I did, sir, but she wouldn't tell me. She only said to bring you to the lab immediately. When they finally entered the lab, they found Jane in the observatory with several massive metal rods pointing straight into the sky. Jane? Oh, you came. Jane shot him a wide smile, gushing with excitement. Look what I did. I recalibrated the observatory sensors to increase the range and scope of your deep space scanners. The atmospheric data you have alone is priceless. Jane. This lab is off limits because the particle generator is not a stable device. Syrian said patiently. Oh, Jane hummed, tilting her head to the side, then you should have placed a warning sticker on it or something. It's right there with a big white skull and everything. Syrian pointed at the danger sign plastered on the quantum chamber's outer wall. Oh, that. I missed that, Jane said with an innocent smile while Syrian shot her a disbelieving look. Anyway, I got something to show you. Jane waved off his concerned look and pulled up some readings on a projected screen that took his attention. My modifications to your device were spot on. Look, it even predicted a dark energy anomaly in deep space. Despite wanting to chastise Jane for using the particle generator, his attention shifted to the readings and what they meant. This reading, you got this now? Syrian asked with a frown as he pushed the tracking model created by Jane to be rerun using his own model. Yep. Right after I made the modifications, that's why I tripped the alarm. It shows. Jane said in a rush. An imminent spacetime anomaly forming in a trajectory towards Etheria, Syrian said grimly, and at that exact time, the panel on his arm blinked in alarm. Sir, we have detected a dark energy surge breaching our system. Optima suddenly chimed in. Syrian examined the readings and found the energy reading slightly different from what he expected. He saw a more significant energy signature manifesting through the space of the current star system, but his sensors were not detecting multiple jump drives. This much energy in one space-time tear in space. Something is different. Syrian trailed off with a frown. Shall I alert the Dauntless and Star Killer, sir? Optima asked. No, not yet. Raise the shield on our facility, said Syrian. There was a low hum as the facility's power surged. The entire mountain and the Kerlorians' refugee camp were placed under a protective energy dome thanks to Optima's prompt action. Shield emitters are stable, projecting optimum energy output into the barrier. Optima reported. Syrian didn't care for that because he knew it was not a jump drive tearing a hole through spacetime. The pooling of this level of concentrated dark energy was unprecedented. The only thing left to know was whether it was a weapon or some form of long-range teleportation technology. That anomaly's trajectory is shifting. Syrian muttered, noticing the projected trajectory varying every second. It's almost as if they've got advanced scanners capable of detecting our shield, Jane observed. Optima showed the images outside as all their surveillance equipment was pinned on the crusting point of the dark energy. They saw a rainbow-colored energy slamming into the ground right outside the edge of the energy dome through the video feed. The Bifrost, Syrian thought as he stared at the live feed with wide eyes. A single woman was left outside the energy dome when the energy dissipated. Their surveillance equipment zeroed in on the woman, and Syrian suspected the newcomer's identity to be none other than Sif. Is there a costume party I'm unaware of? Jane cracked a joke to bring down the palpable tension in the room. There is now. Syrian muttered before turning to Jane, suit up. We'll greet this guest with caution. Sif blinked away the bright colors from her eyes as the energy of Bifrost receded from her position. She surveyed her surroundings and realized she was slightly off her destination. When Heimdall opened the Bifrost on Odin's orders, she was promised swift transportation straight into the heart of the planet's major settlement. Instead, Sif found herself at the far edge of the settlement, where she could see a giant dome of energy shielding it. I guess that's reason enough for Heimdall to move the Bifrost. Sif thought. When she was told that a new race from outside the Nine Realms was interfering in the affairs of Midgard, she was concerned. There were many terrifying beings out there that'd even make Asgard think twice about confronting them. So, when she was told by the Allfather she was to be a messenger to said being making waves amongst the mortals, she expected the worst. However, the more she learned about this mysterious being and his actions from Heimdall, the more she became somewhat relieved. At least, it was not a Lorelei situation. She suspected the Allfather hadn't deigned to intervene till now because this being had demonstrated no hostility towards the humans of Midgard. In fact, this being seems to have helped the mortals keep Midgard safe from many perils. But now, the being was attracting the ire of powers that were best left unchallenged. It was up to Asgard to keep the unwanted attention of outside beings from compromising the peace in the Nine Realms. Sif walked towards the energy barrier and pressed a palm against it. It didn't harm her but didn't budge an inch when she pushed against it. I suppose I can wait. No doubt, they noticed my arrival. Sif mused, eyeing the settlement protected by the energy barrier. Suddenly, a blasting sound reached her ears, making Sif look up. Her eyes zoomed in on a figure flying into the sky at speeds that shocked her. She had not seen many beings capable of flight in the Nine Realms. Even Thor needed Mjolnir to achieve flight capabilities. So, seeing that this being could fly without any aid from technology or a weapon like Mjolnir was surprising for Sif. She stepped back and ensured her hand was near her sword, which was fastened on her belt as the being floated towards her. It's not often we get visitors, and the few we have had were not friendly. Syrian commented with a pointed look as he floated down to the ground. Strange coming from a visitor to the Nine Realms. Sif said with a raised eyebrow. Indeed. Syrian inclined his head in her direction. I must admit I never expected a visit from an Asgardian in this place. I would have thought you'd be happy that I left Midgard. So, you know of us. Sif observed with a guarded tone. Of course. Asgardians are not the only ones blessed with long eyesight. Sif was once again put on guard at the hidden meaning behind his words. She wondered whether the being before her had abilities similar to Heimdall. It was a terrifying thought if such an ability were in the possession of the being before her. To see into the folds of space and peer into the home of Asgardians and other realms was a terrifying power that could compromise their security. This made it imperative that her diplomatic mission succeed. Taking a deep breath, she calmed her nerves before addressing the being before her with respect. I apologize for my abrupt arrival into your abode. Sif dipped her head before straightening immediately. I'm Sif of Asgard. I come under the orders of King Odin to establish formal diplomatic relations. I carry with me a message from my king and his seal of authority. Well met, Lady Sif of Asgard. Syrian inclined his head with a smile. I am Syrian Vex. On behalf of Etheria, I welcome you. Sif kept an eye out for the curious Krylorians eyeing her from their homes as she followed Syrian into the former Kree stronghold. The warrior within her wanted to bring the Kree to heel for their crimes against these people. But she was a pragmatic warrior sworn to serve the throne of Asgard. Even though it was abhorrent to see the Kree enslave multiple planets and send them off into mining planets to fuel their war machine, she knew there was nothing Asgard could do without sacrificing Asgardian lives. They had managed to keep the Kree away from the Nine Realms to the best of their ability. So, she respected Sirian's work with Krylorians on the planet. The barrier surrounding the settlement collapsed around her as they approached the former Kree stronghold. "So, what message do you carry from Odin, Lady Sif?" Sirian asked as they crossed through the stronghold's entrance with 2 sentries guarding the doorway. "Your actions on this planet have attracted the attention of the Kree High Command. They're gathering their fleet to reclaim this planet. This is not news to me. The Kree are welcome to try, but they'll fail miserably," Sirian said with confidence. It'd be a terrible mistake to underestimate the strength of the Kree Empire. Their empire spans many planets and galaxies with a dedicated military presence across galaxies and slave planets feeding resources into their empire. Sif warned with a troubled look. Even Asgard, with all its armies and power, refused to draw into a war against the Kree for the simple reason of mutually assured destruction. They preferred to keep to the Nine Realms and used the threat of open war to keep outside powers from interfering in the worlds of Yggdrasil. It was not a sound strategy, and Sif suspected whether it always worked, but it was better than Asgard sending its citizens to wage wars without end. "You underestimate us, Lady Sif. It's true we don't have the power to challenge the Kree fleet with the meager fleet of 3 ships. But we have more than enough firepower to turn this system into the graveyard of a Kree fleet," said Sirian, leading Sif into a room full of bright screens and projected displays. Sif's eyes widened as she gazed at the brightly lit room covered with miniature screens with live feeds. "Is this?" Sif asked, her eyes blinking in surprise. All these plasma cannons dug in, covering every inch of this planet's cislunar space to give the Kree fleet a warm welcome. "We also have mined the cislunar space and are in the process of arming the twin moons with more weapons. If time allows, we'll install a slew of military satellites to increase our precision strikes," Sirian explained while the screens pulled up each of those defensible military installations for Sif to see. Sif watched the screens with surprise, but she took measures not to show it outwardly. It was no accident that Sirian showed off the planet's defenses to her. She suspected it was a warning to Asgard more than anything else. It was a subtle message to Asgard to stay out of the internal matters of this planet. "As I said, we're more than ready to match the Kree fleet in this star system." She believed him to some extent. She could see Sirian was not callous enough to dismiss the threat of the Kree fleet and rest on his laurels. But she had her concerns. "Asgard has guarded the Nine Realms from outside forces for more than a millennium to the best of our ability. If you pursue a war with the Kree Empire, you'll be subject to continuous assaults from the vast Kree fleet. Are you ready to face such an onslaught? Are the Krylorians and the humans in your army ready to face the full might of the Kree Empire?" Sif asked. Sirian just smiled before leading her out of the room into the other parts of the base. Along the way, she saw the humans and Krylorians training side by side in combat. She saw the humans working extensively on crafts and other giant metal contraptions within the stronghold. They watched her closely when she walked beside Sirian. "Tell me, if Asgard was attacked by the Kree tomorrow, would you fight to the bitter end or throw your weapon down and meekly run away?" Sirian asked with a raised eyebrow. "I'll fight, of course. It's a great honor to die on the battlefield in Asgard's name." Sif replied immediately with a glare, offended at the insinuation that she'd do anything less for her homeland. "You see, that's the same will of the Krylorians and the humans on this planet. We'll hold this planet no matter the cost. The Kree are welcome to test our resolve. But you must understand the Kree won't stop once they start hunting you. If you pull back from this planet to Midgard, they'll follow you to Midgard and destroy everything on their path to get you," Sif warned with a frown. This was the crux of the problem and Asgard's primary concern. Once the Kree had a tangible reason to attack Midgard, an all-out war between Asgard and the Kree Empire would be inevitable. This was not an enviable position King Odin wanted for Asgard. Then help us hold the Kree out of the 9 realms. You know they've visited Midgard many times in the past to raise a slave army to fight their wars. They've systematically tested the level of your tolerance, and they won't stop pushing their agenda in Midgard in the future. What do you mean by that? The Kree has never visited Midgard. We have a pact with the Kree to leave the 9 realms. Sif said with a frown but paused as a drone brought forth a small metallic object before her eyes. This is a diviner. It holds a genetically mutating serum that can induce a genetic trigger within certain humans to transform them into metahumans with special powers. The Kree Empire did this experimentation to build an army of enhanced humans to use them as fodder in their many wars. Sirian said without holding anything back, which only brought horror to Sif. No, Sif whispered in horror. If Asgard intended to safeguard the 9 realms from the threat of Kree expansion, then you failed miserably. But how? Heimdall watches the 9 realms. Sif's eyes widened as realization finally set in. But she couldn't fathom why Odin wouldn't act against the Kree, and she knew Heimdall would inform the All-Father about the activities of the Kree. The peace treaty with the Kree Empire expressly stipulated that their presence in the 9 realms would incur a military response from Asgard's army. I do not know why King Odin has ignored these incursions. Maybe he has gone back on his policy of protecting the 9 realms from outside forces. It matters not because we, have decided to fight back and destroy the Kree from this galaxy. Sirian said firmly, his eyes shining with resolve. You intend to wage war against the Kree Empire? Sif asked with wide eyes. Once we have the proper military strength to do so, we shall push the Kree out of this galaxy for good. Until then, we intend to hold Etheria and turn it into a fortress against the Kree. Sif stared into Sirian's stormy gray eyes, seeing the resolve within before nodding in respect. If this be your intent, then I won't dissuade you, son of Vex. I shall relay your intentions to King Odin and inform him of this revelation. Sif's eyes fell on the diviner with a disgusted look. Will Odin have a change of heart and provide us with support? Sirian asked curiously. I cannot say for certain. Sif admitted with some disappointment. As much as she liked to think Odin would marshal all Asgard's forces, she suspected nothing of the sort would happen. It was more than likely that Heimdall had already informed Odin about these Kree incursions into Midgard. If Odin hadn't acted till now, she suspected it would be foolish of her to expect anything else at this point. Nonetheless, I shall speak strongly in support of your cause to my king. In the meantime, these are the troop movements of the Kree fleet Asgard has noticed. Sif handed over the information her king had allowed to pass on to Sirian. While I know this is not the help you need, consider it King Odin's approval of your intent. The Kree are a scourge on this galaxy. Should you succeed in pushing their vile empire out of this galaxy, then you'd be doing the cause of peace a great service. I appreciate the gesture. Please convey my thanks to Odin. Sirian nodded before accepting the metallic cylinder containing the message. Shall I prepare quarters for you? It'd be impolite not to give you our hospitality when you have come this far. I believe that's not necessary. I shall be taking my leave soon. I see. In that case, can I trouble you by asking for another favor? Sirian asked as he led her to the very top of the stronghold. If it's within my power, I shall see what I can do. Ask away. Sif nodded encouragingly. I'd appreciate it if you could give me the location or a way to contact the Light Elves of Alfheim. The Alfar. Sif breathed with wide eyes. What do you want with them? Let's just say I have something in common with them. Sirian said with a grin, his whole body glowing with light.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.